Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Lauren Hugelmayer. Lauren Hugelmayer was born on June 9, 1988, in Los Angeles County, California. She was one of three daughters of Dale and Lori. Lauren grew up in a close-knit religious family that regularly attended their local church and was well loved in the community. She developed a reputation for being exceptionally kind, caring, known for her bright smile and vibrant personality. Lauren had a close bond with her older sister Beth, but she was even closer to her father, with whom she shared a trusting relationship. While in high school, Lauren met a classmate named Matthew Phelps, who would later play an important role in her life. At that time, it was unclear whether they were just acquaintances or had a closer relationship. After Lauren's family moved to North Carolina, Matthew transferred to another school, which interrupted their connection. After graduating from high school, Lauren chose to attend Appalachian State University, where she earned a degree in business administration and management in 2011. In 2014, Lauren received a direct message on Instagram from Matthew. While Lauren had a stable life, Matthew lived in Kent and faced significant challenges. His father was completely absent, and his mother had remarried several times. Matthew struggled to connect with any of his stepfathers. This lack of parental attention contributed to behavioral problems in his life. During high school, Matthew fell in with a bad crowd, began abusing alcohol and banned substance, particularly cough syrup, which is often misused for its psychoactive effects. His substance abuse became increasingly obvious, and his grades suffered as a result. In response, his grandparents decided to transfer him from public high school to a private Christian academy, hoping this change would help him turn his life around. Eventually, this decision paid off. Matthew improved his academic performance and distanced himself from negative influences. After graduating, he chose to enroll in a Baptist university with the goal of becoming a pastor. Although he later abandoned this ambition. Let's return to his online reunion with Lauren. Matthew and Lauren started talking to learn more about each other. They quickly discovered they had many shared interests, including being big fans of Star Wars and Harry Potter. They also connected through their strong Christian faith and then their desire to build a family together. As their conversations continued, they transitioned from chatting online to nearly daily phone calls. A few months later, they decided to enter a long-distance relationship. Their bond grew stronger, and Matthew made an effort to visit Lauren whenever possible. Eventually, he chose to move to North Carolina to be closer to her to deepen their relationship. Lauren was thrilled by this decision because she had always dreamed of finding someone with whom she could create a strong family. Most of Lauren's family welcomed Matthew, particularly her mother, who treated him like another son and tried to introduce him to the family. However, things were not as easy with Lauren's father, Dale. He seemed reluctant to accept Matthew as part of the family and often avoided him, though the reasons for this were unclear. It might have just been a feeling. Despite this, Lauren's family made efforts to help Matthew feel more comfortable, and they eventually invited him to a family dinner. That night, while playing games and talking, Matthew surprised everyone by confessing that he was married before he got into a relationship with Lauren, but his marriage had ended. He did not provide any reasons for his divorce, which raised concerns for Dale. Dale felt that Matthew's refusal to explain might indicate that he had done something wrong, making Dale worry about his daughter's future. However, Lauren and the rest of the family seemed unconcerned about this issue. It was puzzling because despite their strong traditional values, none of them questioned Matthew's honesty or character. Lauren and Matthew continued their relationship. In 2015, they decided to get engaged. On November 11, 2016, they finally got married and hosted a big celebration. The wedding was a success, and since they were both fans of Star Wars, they chose this theme for the celebration. However, there was one unpleasant incident. Matthew's mother wore white to the wedding, despite being told that it was inappropriate. This suggested that she did not approve of Lauren. Additionally, Lauren's family found Matthew's mother rude and unpleasant. Dale expressed his discontent with the wedding due to lingering doubts about his son-in-law. He tried to suppress these feelings to avoid ruining his daughter's special day. After the wedding, Lauren and Matthew appeared very happy, with Lauren frequently posting pictures of herself and Matthew on social media, suggesting they had a perfect relationship. However, behind the scenes, their situation was more complicated. Matthew's coldness and contradictions began to show, revealing his true character. Their different childhood experiences turned them into different individuals. They both had what could be said to be different views on life, so problems began to arise. Additionally, Matthew's mother's rude behavior toward Lauren worsened the situation. For reasons unknown, she excluded Lauren from the family and often made her feel unwelcome. At that time, Lauren was independent and responsible, she even juggling 3 jobs because of her love for children. She volunteered at a children's Sunday school, worked as an auditor for a pharmaceutical company, and sold scented candles, which she enjoyed. Lauren also formed strong friendships with her colleagues, who appreciated her kindness and empathy. Lauren's dreams and plans were tragically shattered in the early hours of September 1, 2017. At midnight, emergency services received a distressing call from a man who sounded confused and embarrassed. He reported, "I turned on the light and saw her lying dead on the floor, and I have blood on me. There's a bloody knife on the bed, and I think I did it. I can't believe it. I'm right next to her." This man was Lauren's husband, Matthew. Matthew claimed he couldn't remember anything. He explained that before going to bed, he had taken a lot of cough syrup, which he believed caused him to commit this terrible act. When the police arrived, they found that Lauren was still alive. They rushed her to the hospital, however, despite their efforts, she sadly succumbed to her injuries and blood loss before reaching the hospital. When investigators examined the scene, they noticed it appeared too orderly, almost as if it had been staged. The knife was neatly placed on the bed, and the syrup was prominently displayed on the table, matching the details provided in the emergency call. However, they were surprised to find very little blood on Matthew, only a few drops on his shirt and shoes. This led them to suspect that an attempt had been made to clean up the scene before the emergency was reported, indicating that something more complicated was happening. Police believe it was not an accident. Additionally, the police noted Matthew's unusual behavior. He appeared calm despite expressing sadness over his wife's death. This made Matthew the prime suspect in the case, and he was eventually arrested. Authorities confiscated mobile phones, computers, documents, and journals containing Matthew's notes for investigation. A blood sample was also taken for toxicology tests. Investigators faced the difficult task of informing Lauren's family about these developments, leaving them devastated. An autopsy revealed that Lauren had suffered 123 stab and cut wounds. This raised the question, could an over-the-counter cough syrup turn a loving husband into a murderer? The syrup contains 2 active ingredients. Some believe that taking it in high doses can lead to euphoria, agitation, psychosis, and destructive behavior. To address these concerns, the product's manufacturer issued a statement expressing condolences to Lauren's family while also confirming that there was no evidence linking the syrup to violent behavior. Additionally, toxicology tests on Matthew showed that, although the syrup was detected in his blood, the dosage was not high enough to impact his mental state. Therefore, his claim that he was intoxicated by syrup when he attacked his wife was dismissed. The investigators aimed to understand what led Matthew to commit this act, so they conducted a detailed investigation, gathering information from family and friends. They discovered that Lauren and Matthew's relationship was not as ideal as it appeared in photos. Shortly after their wedding, they began experiencing various issues. Lauren was very independent and hardworking. In contrast, Matthew had a different attitude toward work. He was not motivated to work and often struggled to find or keep a job. Whenever he started a new job, he would quickly quit without explanation. Additionally, Matthew had a problem with overspending, particularly on unnecessary items like game consoles, video games, and online gaming subscriptions. Lauren and Matthew had a savings account for a trip to Disney. However, Matthew spent all the money without Lauren's consent or knowledge, even taking money from her purse, which amounted to stealing. This behavior caused frequent arguments between them. His excessive spending led to financial problems, which the Hugelmeyer family recognized. Their relationship became increasingly strained, so Lauren expressed to family and friends that she might leave if things didn't improve. When asked why she hadn't taken that step, she cited her religious belief that everyone can be redeemed if they have faith. This belief motivated her to give her marriage a chance, but in reality, she found it difficult to tolerate her husband's behavior. Friends of Lauren reported that Matthew was controlling and jealous. He wrongly accused Lauren of having an affair with a church friend, despite there being no evidence to back this claim. Matthew had an irrational fear that Lauren would leave him, which stemmed from his previous marriage. He revealed to her that he divorced his first wife because she had been unfaithful, cheating on him with a church staff member. This experience left him in constant fear of abandonment. However, Matthew's behavior was inconsistent. He became very close to a neighbor and spent a lot of time with her. Even though he denied any romantic involvement, Lauren was convinced he was cheating on her with this neighbor. Despite her accusations, Matthew continued to see the woman. During police questioning, the neighbor claimed that their relationship was purely platonic. She explained that they connected because both were dealing with depression and anxiety. However, she noticed that Matthew had begun to discuss painful subjects, mostly related to death, prompting her to limit their interactions. At one point, Matthew claimed he had decided to return to college to pursue his dream of becoming a pastor, in an effort to win back Lauren's trust and save their relationship. Lauren reacted positively to this news. However, as time went on, their situation did not improve. Lauren's relatives observed that she had been in a very bad state and was no longer as happy as she used to be. They felt guilty for not intervening sooner. Lauren's older sister, Beth, made a significant statement. She recounted a phone call with Lauren the night before, during which Lauren was cooking dinner. During that call, the neighbor knocked on the door looking for Matthew. Without hesitation, Matthew left with the neighbor, leaving Lauren's dinner untouched. Beth expressed her frustration, saying she could no longer accept the situation and was convinced Matthew was cheating on Lauren, leading Lauren to decide to leave him. As the police gathered more evidence, the motive behind Lauren's death became clearer. The authorities conducted a detailed investigation of the apartment and confirmed their initial suspicions: Matthew had cleaned up before calling emergency services. Detectives also found what appeared to be an intimate diary of Matthew. This diary contained notes about his arguments with Lauren, his struggles with low self-esteem, and his feelings of insecurity in their marriage, especially since he knew her family had never accepted him. When experts examined Matthew's mobile phone, they discovered troubling search queries in his history. These included questions about the dangers of cough syrup and its effects on consciousness. This strongly suggested two things: first, that the attack was premeditated, and second, that Matthew was trying to mislead the authorities into thinking he was unaware of killing his wife while under the influence of the syrup. An important detail uncovered through Matthew's mobile phone revealed that just hours before he killed his wife, they had a heated argument through text messages and calls. Matthew claimed that Lauren accused him of cheating and expressed her desire to end their marriage, sufficient reason for a troubled mind to decide to kill his wife. Additionally, police discovered a secret Instagram account belonging to Matthew under. The profile picture featured a character from the movie American Psycho, which is about a serial killer. His posts were filled with screenshots from the movie, and he even shared photos of himself dressed as one of its characters. Moreover, his posts contained themes that were completely contrary to Christian values, despite his self-identification as a believer. The last post was made just days before Lauren's murder and included disturbing photos of himself with a caption that read, "Everyone thinks I'm a serial killer," along with the hashtag "I found an angel that needs to be killed." Matthew's friend shared that he once expressed a fascination with killing, suggesting that taking a life would be a true joy. This troubling revelation paints a stark picture of Matthew, especially in light of statements made by his first wife concerning their separation. She revealed that their relationship, initially filled with common interests, deteriorated after marriage. Matthew began to overspend and failed to contribute financially. More alarmingly, he became abusive, often pulling her out of bed, throwing her to the floor, and assaulting her during his rages. This behavior left she terrified, leading her to seek a divorce. Her experience closely mirrors that of Lauren. During the trial, the defense argued that Matthew was not in his right mind during the crime and was likely suffering from instability and depression, worsened by substance use. They presented letters from Matthew's friends and colleagues to the court, claiming that his actions were out of character and that he was not a violent person. The trial occurred in October 2018. Although Matthew initially pleaded not guilty, he later accepted a plea agreement. On October 5th, the judge found him guilty of first-degree involuntary manslaughter and sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Lauren's family is still deeply affected by her absence and feels guilty for not stopping her relationship. To honor her memory, they created a foundation focused on raising awareness about abusive relationships and domestic violence. Matthew Phelps was a manipulative person who only cared about his own needs, disguising himself as someone harmless. Sadly, Lauren's compassion blinded her to his true nature, and it may have only been in her final moments that she understood his true character. Unfortunately, there are many individuals like him who can deceive others with ease. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case, the case of Omima Nelson. Omima Ari Nelson was an Egyptian immigrant who moved to the United States at the age of 18. She was both intelligent and attractive, but her quest for the American dream turned into a nightmare. This is the story of how a once promising woman became a dangerous individual. Omima was born in 1968. She grew up in a rural area plagued by poverty and family instability. Her father was a harsh and abusive figure, displaying cruelty toward his wife and children. At the age of 7, Omima endured female genital mutilation, according to the woman's custom and according to her father's wishes, a traumatic experience that left her in pain throughout her life. This brutal procedure was performed with primitive tools, often without anesthesia, and was carried out by her own mother. Eventually, Omima's mother found the courage to leave her abusive husband, who was also Omima's father. She took her family to the City of the Dead ghetto in Cairo, surrounded by graveyards. Despite its ominous name, the City of the Dead was once a peaceful place, but had recently become one of Cairo's largest and most run-down slums. It is estimated that over 1 million people live there, united by their shared hardships. Despite her difficult beginnings, Omima blossomed physically. She grew into a beautiful young woman. When Omima turned 18, she met an American oilman, Roger Stainbrook, and fell in love. Her family encouraged her to marry him, and she eagerly agreed. They married in 1986, and Omima soon moved to USA to join her husband. However, their marriage quickly became unhappy for reasons that remained unclear. At just over 18, Omima found herself alone in America, struggling financially and with limited English skills. She decided that her best chance for stability was to meet men in bars. As returning to Cairo was not an option she was considering, she was determined to keep moving forward. Omima had limited professional skills, so she worked as a maid and took on various cash-paying odd jobs. Her beauty eventually led her to become a part-time model, which helped her pay her rent. However, she soon grew tired of relying solely on her looks for temporary jobs. She began to seek other ways to secure some income, and at some point, Omima's way of making money is to become a criminal. She engaged in a series of deceptive relationships with men to extract money from them, moving from one man to another and from city to city. As her actions escalated, she began to tie up her victims and threaten them with a weapon during the robberies, fully aware of the fear she instilled in them. Once she got what she wanted, she would spend the money and look for her next target. Omima was cold, bold, and ruthless, showing no signs of remorse or sleepless nights over her actions. In 1991, at the age of 23, Omima moved to Orange County, California, where she met William Edwin Bill Nelson, her main target. They encountered each other while playing billiards at a bar. William, a 56-year-old Texan, was a large man and a former pilot who had lost his job due to a conviction for transporting illegal substances. He served time in federal prison for his crimes, yet many people regarded him as a respectable individual and were willing to support his character. After his release, William relocated to Costa Mesa to start anew and secured a job at a mortgage company. He often bragged about his land holdings in Texas and liked to flaunt his wealth. William was a father to 5 children and a grandfather to 17 grandchildren. Omima was attracted to older men for several reasons, including her belief that they would treat her better. She assumed that by their age, men had typically achieved financial stability, which was certainly appealing to her. When Omima discovered that William Nelson owned a red Corvette, she felt she had struck gold the night they met. William's striking appearance, complete with red cowboy boots and a large belt buckle, made it clear that he was a confident and significant man. He also shared that he owned a large cattle ranch in Texas, which appealed to Omima, who had always longed for someone to take care of her. The chemistry between them was instant, and they fell in love quickly, deciding to marry just a month after their first encounter. They were not interested in making wedding plans or wasting time and money. Instead, they organized a telephone ceremony with an Egyptian priest and then traveled to Phoenix, where they found a justice of the peace to finalize their marriage. Afterward, the newlyweds enjoyed a honeymoon in Texas and Arkansas, during which William introduced Omima to his family. Everyone admired her strong and determined nature. During the trip, Omima suffered a serious injury from a horse fall, and although it was quite severe, she chose to take aspirin, have a bit of vodka, and continue their journey rather than seek medical help. One of William's daughters remarked that Omima was tough as nails. After spending a few weeks traveling and enjoying their new life together, William and his new wife returned to his apartment in Costa Mesa to settle in. Around this time, William called his daughter to share how well things were going. He was excitedly preparing to celebrate their first Thanksgiving together and felt that life couldn't be better. William invited his daughter to join them, but she declined, and that was the last time they spoke. On December 1, 1991, early in the morning, a man named Jose Esquivel was startled awake by loud knocking at his door. Still groggy and confused, he decided to look out the window first. He didn't see anyone at the door, but he noticed a red Corvette parked outside that he had never seen before. Feeling uneasy about the situation, Jose chose not to answer the door at that hour. Later that day, around 1 p.m., the red car returned to his house, and the driver knocked on the door again. This time, Jose answered and found Omima standing there. She was crying heavily and showed him cuts on her arms and face. She claimed that her husband had been abusing her, beating her, and holding her captive for several days. With great effort, she said she had managed to free one of her hands, grab a nearby lamp, and hit William Nelson to death in self-defense. She insisted that this was true through her tears. Omima told Jose that she had dismembered William's body and put the remains in trash bags. She said she needed a truck or vehicle to help her get rid of them. In return, she gave him some equipment and the false promise of $75,000. Jose agreed and told her to wait at William's apartment while he went to get his truck. However, Jose was cautious. As soon as Omima left, he called 911 and reported her confession to the police. The police found William's car, where they discovered his wife, and they quickly began questioning Omima. She denied everything, claiming she never said anything like that to Jose, and insisted that William was just in Florida on a business trip. Although she seemed cooperative, her answers to the police were odd and sometimes contradictory. What happened next took the situation to a whole new level of strangeness. The police discovered a suitcase in William's car that contained human organs. Omima claimed that the remains belonged to a person William had killed. Among the organs was a pair of lungs with black spots, suggesting that the victim had been a heavy smoker. William himself had also been a long-time smoker. The detectives were not yet 100% sure it was him, but at that moment, they already knew they were dealing with a murder. The police swiftly obtained a search warrant for Mr. Williams' apartment, where they discovered many gruesome items. They found several suitcases and trash bags containing human body parts. In William's bedroom, blood was dripping from the mattress onto the bed, and all 4 bedposts were broken, suggesting that a struggle had taken place. They also uncovered a broken lamp and an iron, both stained with blood, human tissue, and hair. The kitchen was chaotic and disturbing. In the garbage can, they found pieces of a thigh mixed with other turkey parts and cranberry sauce. When the police looked inside the freezer, upon removing the bags, they found a large round object wrapped in foil. Unwrapping it revealed that it was William's head. Omima claimed that she had been held captive by William. Yet, investigators discovered markings around his ankles that suggested he had been shackled. They were uncertain about his wrists, since they were detached from the hands and showed signs of injury. During her examination, a forensic expert determined that the wounds and bruises on Omima's body were self-inflicted. She was soon taken in for questioning and faced with overwhelming evidence against her. Realizing she had been caught in a lie, she gradually disclosed more information. She claimed not to remember how she killed William and said she woke up to find him in trash bags. She stated that a demon or something inside her compelled her actions. She even described having a vision of 2 bloody women repeatedly urging her that William had to die, which she said drove her to commit the murder. Omima didn't just kill William. The investigation revealed more horrifying details about his death. He suffered at least 25 blunt force injuries to the head. It appears that William and Omima were engaging in a consensual role-playing game in the bedroom when she persuaded him to let her tie him up. The dismemberment of his body was so skillfully done that the coroner's office questioned whether this was her first time, or if she had done this before. When detectives weighed the remains, they noticed a discrepancy between the weight of the body parts and the weight listed on William's driver's license. They calculated the missing parts of his body. Additionally, a neighbor reported hearing the garbage disposal running all weekend until it eventually broke, leading investigators to suspect that Omima may have eaten pieces of her husband. After her arrest, authorities discovered a troubling pattern in Omima's past, which included relationships with older men, thefts, and a prior arrest for shoplifting at pharmacies. In each case, she displayed aggressive behavior, showed no remorse, and never accepted responsibility for her actions. Omima was arrested on suspicion of murder on December 2, 1991, and her trial began in Santa Ana almost exactly a year later on December 1, 1992. During the trial, the prosecution called her ex-boyfriend, Robert Hansen, to testify. He shared a disturbing experience in which she had chained him to a bed and threatened him with a gun, demanding all his money. Luckily, he managed to escape and disarm her, but he chose not to report the incident to the police due to feelings of humiliation and shame. Thus, no charges were brought against her. The deputy public defender portrayed her as a victim who acted against her abuser, insisting that she was innocent. In contrast, the deputy district attorney argued that Omima had planned to escape with William's money, credit cards, and luxury car after murdering him. The trial included shocking testimonies that left many horrified. Omima revealed to the jurors that she had stabbed and beaten her tormentor, William Nelson, to death. After the murder, she became frightened and entered a trance-like state. She spent 12 hours dismembering his body to facilitate disposal and discarded them in the trash. During the dismemberment, she claimed to have worn a red hat, red high-heeled shoes, and raspberry lipstick as part of a ritual. She believed she was descended from ancient Egyptians and said she communicated with the warrior goddess of Upper Egypt, who is often depicted as a lioness and associated with bloodlust. Omima asserted that she acted on the goddess's behalf. She believed that the people of ancient Egypt were aiding her in planning to dismember William's body and scatter his remains to prevent him from entering the afterlife. William was castrated in a brutal act, and there were rumors that some of the tortures may have occurred while he was still alive. A psychiatrist labeled Omima as a psychopath, highlighting the severe issues within her psyche. Despite the absence of any evidence of an attack on her, the psychologist asserted that William had subjected his wife to demands for violent intimacy. This situation was exacerbated by humiliating insults, and when she refused to comply with his demands, William became enraged. During her court testimony, Omima's lawyer discussed the alleged abuse she endured throughout her life. He claimed she exhibited signs of post-traumatic stress disorder and recounted how nearly all her family members had beaten, tortured, or attacked her in various ways. When Omima testified, she recounted how her husband yelled, "I bought you and am getting what I paid for," and then simply used her. She stated that this was just one of many similar incidents. In court, Omima testified that one day she reached her breaking point and attacked William with scissors. She then grabbed an iron and whatever else she could find to harm him further. The judge asked, "We're missing about 130 pounds of William's weight. Do you know what happened to it?" She responded, "I don't know. He was all there," insisting under oath that she never ate anything related to William and claiming she is not a monster. She also mentioned that William often restrained her and had even thrown her cat out of a car window once. Additionally, she recounted a threat made by William during a trip where he said he would bury her body in the desert if she didn't follow his demands. The jury found her guilty of second-degree murder. They did not believe her accounts of an abusive relationship with William Nelson. The Orange County Superior Court jury acquitted Omima of first-degree murder after determining there was not enough evidence to show that the killing was premeditated. On January 12, 1993, Omima received a 27-year prison sentence for second-degree murder, as well as for assault, unlawful deprivation of liberty, and robbery against a former boyfriend. Omima has expressed remorse for dismembering her husband William, stating, "I knew for sure I would have been killed if I hadn't done this." She was denied parole in 2006 and 2011. In the 1990s, while serving her sentence, Omima remarried a disabled man in his 70s, who later died. Reports indicate that they had 3-day meetings in the kitchen, where knives were present, but Omima insists she never felt threatened. She also claims to have loved her new husband and describes him as completely normal. After his death, Omima is said to have inherited a significant amount of money from him. It is not hard to believe that she has a whole crowd of crazed people who worship her like a god, which she considers herself to be. But beneath Mima's outward beauty lies a true monster. Currently, Omima is serving her sentence at the Central California Women's Facility, where she is alongside other inmates. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Danilo Restivo. Elisa Claps was born in 1977 in Potenza, Italy, a small town with a population of just under 70,000, known for its steep slopes. Her mother was a treasury clerk, and her father worked in a tobacco shop. Elisa was the youngest of 3 children, with 2 older brothers named Gildo and Luciano. The family was very religious and attended church every Sunday. Elisa was known for her kindness and sweet nature. She always focused on the good in people, which sometimes made her seem naive. This drew others to her, so she had many friends. In 1993, 16-year-old Elisa was in her senior year of high school and was thinking about her future. She dreamed of becoming a doctor and planned to enroll in medical school after graduation. Her ultimate goal was to volunteer in Africa with Médecins Sans Frontières. On September 12, 1993, Elisa was preparing for a family gathering at their country house and wanted to get everything ready early in the morning. Her parents and one of her brothers had gone out of town, while Gildo was expected to arrive later for lunch. As usual on Sundays, Elisa planned to go to church with her friend Eliana de Silas, who would also join the family for the festive meal afterward. Elisa woke up early that morning, left home at 11:30, and went to the Church of Chiesa della Trinità, located in the center of town. Her brother was waiting for her return. While he was waiting, the doorbell rang, and he thought Elisa had come back from church. Instead, he found Eliana at the door. She explained that they had been together at church, but when they exited, a large crowd passed by, and they got separated. Eliana said she couldn't find Elisa and decided to come to her house, hoping she had already returned. From the start, her explanation seemed unconvincing since it was hard to lose track of someone in such a small town. When her brother pointed out these inconsistencies, Eliana changed her story. She admitted that Elisa was supposed to meet a boy and that the plan was for the schoolgirls to go home together after the service. However, her friend was unable to find Elisa at the agreed time. According to Eliana, the mysterious boy was named Danilo Restivo. He was born on April 3, 1972, in Iris, a small town in Sicily. In the mid-1980s, Danilo and his family moved to Potenza, Basilicata, after his father, Maurizio, secured a job as the director of the municipal library, a prestigious position that prompted the family to relocate. The other boys found Danilo to be unusual. During his school years, he engaged in troubling behavior, such as spying on girls in the bathroom and keeping a diary to record what he observed. His cousin, who is 2 years younger, described him as an introvert who struggled to communicate with his peers, particularly girls. Danilo's sister, Antonella Restivo, noted that they would often walk home together, and he would try to persuade her to go to different places for various reasons. She usually declined, but one day her curiosity got the better of her, and she wanted to see what Danilo was talking about. Not wanting to go alone, she asked her cousin, who was 11 at the time, to join her. When the children arrived at the designated time and place, Danilo told them he needed to blindfold them and tie their wrists so they could go to a secret location. They both agreed. Danilo led them to a place where he seated them in chairs. Antonella managed to push her blindfold aside and saw Danilo putting on gloves. After that, he took a knife, tilted the cousin's head back, and stabbed him. Antonella reacted quickly and attacked Danilo, causing him to flee. The cousin was injured and bleeding, but Antonella helped him, and they both ran away together. Danilo chased after them, shouting for them not to tell anyone about what had happened. The cousin lost a significant amount of blood, and when he arrived at the hospital, doctors discovered that the knife had come dangerously close to a vital artery. He was on the brink of a serious injury. The children informed the adults about the incident, clarifying that it was not an accident. Consequently, a police report was filed against Danilo for his actions. Danilo's father, Maurizio, visited the family of Danilo's cousin, and tearfully asked them to withdraw the police report. He offered them money and claimed to understand Danilo's psychological issues, promising to get him the help he needed. Because he was a respected member of the community, Danilo's cousin's family agreed to his plea. They accepted the money and dropped the report. However, instead of fulfilling his promise, Maurizio obstructed Danilo's treatment to protect his own reputation. As a result, Danilo changing schools several times without finding a place where he felt accepted. After attending 3 different schools, his father eventually enrolled him in a private college, where he graduated from high school. Danilo then joined the military, but was dismissed shortly after due to inappropriate behavior and bedwetting. Despite his father's wealth and connections, Danilo struggled with personal issues. He earned a reputation for being intrusive and rude toward girls, and his father did nothing to intervene, allowing Danilo's behavior to worsen. He became fixated on 3 girls in his neighborhood, spying on them, and developing an unhealthy obsession. He would call them, breathing heavily into the phone or commenting on their outfits. Sometimes, he even played classical music over the phone, which made the girls uncomfortable. His actions escalated to sending disturbing letters and creepy gifts, including a timer with severed wires labeled, "Boom, this is how much time you have left." One of the girls, Elisa, became the main focus of Danilo's obsession. He would show up unexpectedly in places he knew she would be and ask her out on dates, but Elisa did not like him and found him annoying. Despite this, her kind nature led her to agree to meet him several times while trying to maintain her distance. Elisa's brother Gildo noticed Danilo's intrusive behavior. One day, while walking with Elisa, Danilo approached them, calling out to her and trying to pull her away. Elisa squeezed Gildo's hand tightly, indicating her fear, and Gildo chased Danilo away. Gildo was concerned by his sister's frightened reaction, but Elisa chose not to share the details of her encounters with Danilo. When Elisa's friend Eliana mentioned that Elisa was supposed to meet Danilo at church, Gildo became worried. Meanwhile, Elisa hoped this meeting would stop Danilo from pursuing her. Gildo called Danilo's house, but Mr. Maurizio hesitated to let Gildo speak with his son. Gildo expressed his concern that Elisa had not returned home after the meeting with Danilo. Eventually, Mr. Maurizio gave the phone to Danilo, who said he had seen Elisa at church. He claimed she had complained about a young man bothering her and then left while he stayed behind to pray. After that, Mr. Maurizio quickly ended the conversation, making Gildo suspicious. He informed her family about the situation, and they all hurried home to find Elisa. One of her brothers, Luciano, couldn't wait any longer and decided to confront Danilo directly. When he knocked on the door, Mr. Maurizio refused to let him in, prompting Luciano to threaten to break it down. Finally, Danilo appeared, looking anxious and sweating, and began repeating the story he had told Gildo on the phone, stuttering and clearly nervous. Minutes later, Mr. Maurizio suddenly ended his conversation with the neighbor, similar to how he had ended the phone call. The brothers returned home and then went to the church where their sister had already gone. They wanted to check the location where Elisa was supposed to meet Danilo, believing this was likely where she had disappeared. They looked around the church and attempted to enter the upper secret room, but the priest did not allow them in. The family decided to notify the police about Elisa's disappearance, expressing their belief that Danilo was involved. Unfortunately, law enforcement did not initially take the case seriously. They only accepted the report after a day and then went to Restivo's house to question Danilo. Upon arrival, they spoke with Mr. Maurizio, who informed them that his son had left Potenza for Naples and would likely return the following day. The next day, the police went to the bus station in Naples to meet Danilo, but he was not there. It was later discovered that Maurizio had intercepted the bus before it reached the city and took Danilo away. The detectives then went to the family home to question Danilo. When they asked him about the shoes he was wearing on the day Elisa went missing, he said he was wearing sneakers and showed them a pair of wet shoes soaked in bleach, which raised their suspicions. In the evening, Danilo and Maurizio visited the police station, where Danilo shared his account of Elisa's disappearance. His statements were inconsistent, and he appeared visibly nervous. The detectives noticed a deep cut on his hand, which Danilo attributed to an accident in the street. He claimed he had tripped on a staircase and impaled himself on a metal object. He said the deep cut caused heavy bleeding, which stained his clothes. However, Danilo could not identify the location of this incident in the city. Wherever he took the police to support his story, there were no signs of blood. Additionally, his account changed several times during questioning, raising further suspicion. According to his sister, at noon when Elisa disappeared, Danilo returned home covered in blood. She recounted that when he returned home, not only his jacket was stained with blood, but also his shirt and jeans. She noticed Danilo's injury and took him to the hospital, where doctors stitched up his wounds. Judging by the description, it was evident that there was far too much blood for a mere accidental cut to his hand. Despite Danilo's explanation, the police quickly concluded that his injury was caused by a knife. By this time, all the clothes had been washed at the Restivo home. The investigators needed these items to send for forensic examination, explaining that this way they could clear all suspicions about Danilo. But Danilo's family objected. From 11:30 to 13 on the day Elisa went missing, no one saw Danilo, and there was no one available to confirm his statements. At this time, the police officer contacted the chief prosecutor overseeing the investigation into Elisa's disappearance. Despite the reasonable suspicions, the request for a warrant was denied. The prosecutor overlooked the fact that Danilo had previously been involved in a suspicious incident. Additionally, he was clearly the last person known to have seen Elisa alive. Witnesses reported seeing him in the church with Elisa, but none saw her leave. Investigators found a torn-out page in Elisa's diary, suggesting she or someone else was trying to conceal something. Progress in the case hit a standstill until October 5, when Elisa's disappearance and the main suspect, Danilo Restivo, were highlighted on a television program. During the live broadcast, an anonymous woman called in, expressing her belief that Danilo was connected to Elisa's disappearance. She mentioned that he had a fascination with women and collected strange items, including framed locks of hair. To acquire these hair samples, he often loitered near hair salons, where local workers jokingly referred to him as a barber. After the show aired, several women approached the police to identify Danilo and accuse him of cutting their hair without permission in public and hair salons. The police began to view him as someone exhibiting obsessive and inappropriate behavior, which raised concerns about potential deviance. The women shared troubling accounts of his actions, indicating that he was a disturbance to his neighbors. While some considered him an eccentric but harmless individual, they remained unaware of his more sinister traits. Danilo's father maintained that his son had never harmed anyone, although there are stories of incidents involving Danilo's cousin. While many believed that Danilo was involved in Elisa's disappearance, some of his supporters suggested that Elisa had simply left on her own. Elisa's father, who was very close to her, felt early on that he might never see her again. Meanwhile, the Silas family was attentive to the ongoing developments regarding Danilo. The incident lasted until 1996. He was charged with providing false testimony about Elisa's disappearance. Detectives had gathered evidence that contradicted his claims regarding their interactions, his hand injury, and other aspects of the case. Because of his fraudulent behavior, Danilo was eventually sentenced to prison, and he spent part of his sentence working at the local church that Elisa often attended on Sundays. During the trial, Elisa's best friend Eliana was not forthcoming when asked about the false testimony. When the prosecutor pressed her, she revealed her fear that she might suffer the same fate as Elisa, implying that she knew more than she was admitting. Although some of his harassment victims reported him to the police, he only received a fine, which had little effect due to his father's wealth. Meanwhile, the Silas family was anxiously awaiting updates from investigators, hoping for progress in locating their daughter and bringing the perpetrator to justice. Unfortunately, the case remained stagnant until 1999, when a mobster began cooperating with the investigation, providing some new information. While he could not provide details about Elisa, he disclosed that the district attorney had prevented the confiscation of Danilo's clothing. This attorney had canceled the warrant in exchange for a large payment from Mr. Maurizio, effectively hindering the investigation. The mobster was ultimately convicted of slander, but his disclosures prompted a new investigative team to take over Elisa's case. Unfortunately, they had to start from the beginning. The police obtained a search warrant and searched Danilo's home, where they uncovered disturbing items, including a box of photographs of women with visible physical disabilities. Danilo claimed these women were his ex-girlfriends, but it was later revealed that he had intentionally sought out one-legged and one-armed women to photograph, exposing his fascination with mutilated bodies. Investigators also looked into the church to access a door that the local priest, Domenico Sabbia, had previously refused to open for the Chillis family. The priest had locked the church doors to all parishioners and had traveled to Fiji for a wellness retreat, showing little willingness to cooperate. After his release, Danilo traveled across Europe. Although he was in different cities, he continued his reckless behavior by attempting to harass women by cutting their hair. Danilo had moved to the UK after meeting Marsango online. They married, and he accepted her 2 children from a previous relationship. He occasionally returned to visit his parents, always appearing calm. Meanwhile, Gildo created a website to raise awareness about her sister's disappearance. Then, Gildo received a letter signed Elisa, stating that she had run away to Brazil and requested not to be searched for. Realizing it was a fake, Gildo traced the sender's address and discovered that Danilo himself had sent the letter. This revelation heightened the suspicions against him. The case remained unsolved until November 12, 2002, when authorities discovered the body of Heather Barnett, a 48-year-old single mother, in her home in Bournemouth, UK. Her daughters returned from school to find her unresponsive in the bathroom, surrounded by a pool of blood. Heather had been violently attacked with a hammer. Her throat and one of her breasts had been severed. A portion of her hair was cut, and about 30 strands were placed in her left hand. A strand of foreign hair was found in her right hand. It is believed she was assaulted shortly after arriving home from school that morning. During the investigation, the police quickly turned their attention to 2 suspicious neighbors, Marsango and Danilo, both of whom were Italian. Heather worked from home, and it was reported that Danilo had gone to her house to discuss sewing curtains. He was the first person to arrive at the scene with Marsango, just as Heather's children were calling for help. He tried to comfort the girls in that distressing moment. The police brought Danilo in for questioning after the murder. He showed them a bus ticket with a timestamp to support his alibi, claiming he was attending computer courses at the time of the crime. The police believed him and let him go. Danilo seemed to be an awkward person who would leave many clues, unlike the actual murderer. The tests revealed a trail of bloody shoe prints that suddenly stopped, indicating the killer had changed shoes before leaving. It was later discovered that Danilo had cleaned his sneakers with bleach, a practice he had done previously. Terry, Heather's daughter, mentioned that her mother had lost her keys after Danilo's recent visit, but she did not change the locks. This explained why Danilo visited frequently. He had scoped out the crime scene and taken the keys to access the house. The police started monitoring Danilo and tapped his phone for evidence. During their surveillance, they observed him stalking vulnerable women. they decided to confront him and search his belongings. Danilo was found wearing suspicious waterproof pants, and in his car, the police discovered a change of clothes, a butcher's knife, scissors, a balaclava, and gloves, which amounted to an alarming collection of potential crime tools. When the police searched Danilo's home, they found hair strands on the sneakers he wore the day of the murder, along with small bloodstains that were difficult to identify due to bleach. DNA testing showed that a bloodied towel left at the crime scene contained Danilo's DNA, which he claimed he had accidentally left behind during a visit. The police reached out to their colleagues in Italy and discovered that Danilo was a suspect in the disappearance of Elisa, leading many to suspect that he had killed her. The matter remained unresolved until March 17, 2010. 17 years after Elisa vanished, her mummified remains were found by a repair crew in the attic of Most Holy Trinity Church. The remains included her glasses, shoes, pieces of her clothing, and strands of foreign hair. Her bra had been cut, her chest showed signs of mutilation, and her jeans were unbuttoned, indicating she had been abused. Her family suspected that priest Domenico Sabbia had intentionally hidden the body and knew where it was, as he had never allowed anyone to inspect the locked sections of the church. Following the discovery, the church was closed. Preliminary forensic examinations revealed that Elisa had been struck approximately 10 times with a sharp object, likely a knife or scissors. While searching the church attic, investigators found fingerprints and DNA samples belonging to Danilo. Elisa was laid to rest on July 2, 2011. On the afternoon of May 20, 2010, Danilo was arrested in England and charged with the murder of Heather Barnett, with accumulating evidence against him. On June 30, 2011, Danilo Restivo was sentenced to life in prison by Winchester Crown Court. Danilo immediately filed an appeal. On November 8, 2011, a simplified judicial process began in Italy for the murder of Elisa. Danilo, the accused, chose not to participate, even via video link. At that time, legal proceedings in Britain were still ongoing, which resulted in his extradition being denied. The prosecution argued that Danilo had planned to meet Elisa at the church that day, with harmful intentions. When Elisa realized his intentions, she tried to escape by hiding in the attic, but he found her and attacked her from behind. Despite her attempts to defend herself, he abused and killed her. The prosecution presented DNA evidence from bloodstains on Elisa's clothing that matched Danilo's. It was also revealed that Danilo had injured his arm during the struggle, leaving his blood on her clothes. The Italian prosecution requested a 30-year prison sentence, which the court granted on November 11. Additionally, Danilo was ordered to pay €700,000 to Elisa's family. This verdict was confirmed after the final court proceedings, which included Danilo's presence. After the appeal of the Heather Barnett murder case in November 2012, the UK Court of Appeal altered Danilo's minimum sentence to 40 years, stating that it was highly unlikely he would be released. So, in 2051, after completing his sentence in the UK, he will be extradited to Italy to serve an additional 30 years for the murder of Elisa. The long delay in the Elisa Claps murder case was due to several factors, including accusations against the Santissima Trinità Church in Potenza and various individuals involved. These factors contributed to the concealment of the truth and prolonged the investigation. An assistant to the priest, who was found earlier, explained that he did not report the discovery right away because the archbishop was busy that day, and he forgot to do so the following day. Despite protests from Elisa's family, all charges against the church were eventually dropped, especially after the relatives reacted to a memorial plaque that was placed in the church to honor Domenico Sabbia, who concealed the crime and hid the body for many years. In early November 2023, despite objections, the church reopened, and the first service was held. The family of British victim, Heather Barnett, criticized the Italian police's investigation, arguing that if Elisa's body had been found sooner and the perpetrator apprehended, Heather would still be alive. They claimed that the lack of accountability had emboldened the suspect, with some believing he may have committed ritual murders. Elisa was murdered on September 12, 1993, and Heather on November 12, 2002. It raises suspicion that he attacked his victims on those specific dates and left a strand of hair at each crime scene. There are concerns that Danilo Restivo may have had many more victims. Omar Benguit, who has been convicted of murdering Korean national Jong Ok-shin, was sentenced for the crime. Jong Ok-shin was attacked a few meters from her home, 3 blocks from where Danilo lived. There are lawyers suggesting that another individual, Danilo, may have committed the crime for which Omar was sentenced. They claim that the method of murder and the knife used are similar, and a clump of hair was discovered near the body. Jong Ok-shin was killed in 2002, but there is currently no evidence to directly link Danilo to this murder, which is why he has not faced charges in this case. Danilo is under suspicion for assaults on women in Italy, France, and the UK during his stays in those countries. Among them, he is particularly being investigated for a possible link to the disappearance of Erika Ansermin in Italy. Erika went missing on April 20, 2003, after failing to arrive for an Easter lunch with her boyfriend and his mother. Following Danilo's arrest, investigators discovered that he had searched for information about Erika on his computer and appeared to be tracking the developments of her case. This behavior has raised concerns, as it is often exhibited by offenders. To this day, Erika's body has not been found, and no charges have been filed in connection with her disappearance. Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case, the case of Matthew Terry. A woman called 911 from Lithia, a suburb of Tampa, Florida. She reported hearing screams from a nearby house and discovered an injured woman with a severe neck wound, bleeding heavily and struggling to breathe. It seemed that the attacker may have escaped into the woods upon hearing someone approaching the house. To start, let's get to know Kay Baker, a resident of Lithia, Florida, where she lives with her 2 sons. Kay Baker, 43, is a 3rd grade math and science teacher at Cypress Creek Elementary School in Ruskin. On the night of May 28, 2022, which was a quiet and warm evening, her neighbors, Jonathan, was sleeping peacefully on his sofa while his wife and children were also fast asleep. Shortly after midnight, Jonathan was startled awake by sounds that he later described as a scream, the sound of someone falling to the floor, and the sound of someone choking. Initially, he thought one of his daughters had fallen out of bed, so he went upstairs to check, only to find that everyone was still fast asleep. Jonathan decided to investigate the sounds outside and discovered a woman lying face down in his front yard. This woman was later identified as Kay Baker. She was in a pool of blood that appeared to be coming from her neck. While Jonathan checked on her, he heard a noise behind him. He turned to look toward the rustling in the woods behind his house but saw nothing. He then asked his wife, Ruth Figgins, to call 911. Unfortunately, by the time rescue workers and deputies from the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office arrived, Kay had already died. Medical examiners at the scene found multiple stab wounds on her shoulders and neck. The cut on her neck was so severe that detectives believed the attacker intended to behead her, describing it in their reports as almost decapitated. The police searched the area around Kay's house and spotted a gray Ford Focus parked in the driveway. They checked the license plates and confirmed that the car belonged to Matthew Terry. One of the windows in Kay's house was open, and its screen had been removed. This window was in a room used by one of Kay's sons, but neither son was home that night. The window faced the Jonathan's house. A right turn from the window led to the neighbor's front yard where Kay was found, while a left turn led to the backyard, which had drops of blood. Detectives quickly secured a search warrant to enter Kay's house. Inside, they noticed that one knife was missing from the kitchen's meat-cutting set, and a mobile phone was still there. The missing knife was a bird's beak, named for its shape and used for peeling vegetables. The bathroom door frame showed significant damage, suggesting that someone had forcefully broken into the master bedroom, where more recent evidence was also found. Signs of a break-in were evident on the nightstand, where another mobile phone was discovered. They then called in a handler with a dog to track a scent. After some time, the dog led a sheriff's deputy to a wooded area where they found a patch of grass soaked with blood. Realizing the perpetrator might be nearby, the authorities decided to bring in another canine unit with a Belgian Malinois, known for its ability to apprehend criminals. The sheriff's deputies took the dog to the blood site and warned that they would release the dog if anyone was hiding, and did not come out. Shortly after, the dog began barking and tried to rush forward. The police soon discovered Matthew hiding in tall grass and bushes. He was only wearing a t-shirt and underwear, and his clothes were covered in blood. Matthew had injuries on his neck and struggled to walk. After a struggle, the police stopped the pursuit, and he was arrested on a charge of first-degree murder. May 27, 2022, marked the end of the school year, providing a perfect reason to celebrate. That evening, Kay went to a grill bar with her boyfriend, 47-year-old Matthew Terry. While at the bar, they both got up to use the restroom. Kay returned first and accidentally bumped into her friend Kelly Andrews. Overjoyed to see each other unexpectedly, Kay started dancing happily. As Kay danced, a man neither she nor Kelly knew walked by and made a joke about their celebration. This interaction lasted about 4 seconds and occurred just as Matthew was coming out of the restroom. Matthew assumed that Kay was dancing with another man. At the bar, he confronted Kay, angrily accusing her of dancing with a stranger. Kelly and other regular customers overheard their argument. After that, Matthew and Kay left the bar and headed home. It was around 11:30 p.m., and the drive would take over an hour, during which Matthew continued to argue about the dancing. Frustrated, Kay called Kelly and asked her to clarify that she had not danced with the stranger. Kelly then told Matthew to stop being unreasonable. After the phone call, Kay texted her friend to say she was okay. About 30 minutes later, Kay was found in Jonathan's yard, covered in blood. Investigators believe that Matthew was trying to kill Kay. In a drunken rage, he reportedly stabbed her multiple times and attempted to cut her throat. Kay managed to escape through a window and ran into her neighbor's yard. It's important to note that Kay was not Matthew's first victim. He had a history of violence against women. Matthew had been in a relationship with Michelle Rogers. They met in 2015 through a mobile app while both living in Michigan, where Michelle was with her 5-year-old son. After a brief acquaintance and several months of dating, Michelle decided she wanted to end the relationship until she found out she was pregnant. For the sake of the child, she thought it was best to reconcile with Matthew, and after some time, they began living together. However, Michelle quickly became evident that Matthew was a violent person, and his behavior worsened when he was drunk. One time, he threw a cast-iron skillet at Michelle while she was holding their young son. On another occasion, Matthew picked up her cat and threw it against the wall. At night, when he was angry and drunk, Matthew would show up at their apartment and knock on her door, claiming he knew she was sleeping with another man and demanding to be let in. Once, he told one of his colleagues that he wanted to beat Michelle up. The colleague took Matthew's speech as a way for him to vent and didn't think much of it. Several months later, on March 17, 2017, it became evident how serious Matthew's threats were. That day, he went bar hopping with a few friends. By around 6 p.m., Michelle decided to go find Matthew, who was at a nearby bar. When she found him, he was noticeably drunk, slurring his speech and stumbling. Frustrated that he had gotten so intoxicated, Michelle left him at the bar and went home by herself. Around 8 p.m. Matthew knocked on the back door, and she let him in. He was very drunk, unable to stand or walk properly, and appeared upset, bordering on angry. After letting him in, Michelle returned to the couch where she had been sitting before. Meanwhile, Matthew went to the kitchen and seemed to be preparing a sandwich. From the couch, Michelle could easily see him as the kitchen and living room were quite open. Michelle was sitting on the couch watching TV when Matthew suddenly appeared from behind and approached her quickly and aggressively. Startled, she asked, "What are you doing? Oh my God, what are you doing?" Without responding, Matthew began to push her toward the front. In that moment, they both fell to the floor. While they were on the floor, Matthew tried to restrain Michelle and continued to hit her. As they struggled, Michelle attempted to break free and in a moment of desperation, screamed that she loved him and asked why he was doing this. Matthew responded coldly, saying, "You don't need to say anything to me. I am just going to kill you. I'm going to beat it out of you." Michelle continued to fight back and managed to get to her feet. However, Matthew struck her in the face multiple times with great force, knocking her down to the floor again. Despite her efforts to rise, Matthew jumped on her, using his full weight to keep her down. Her hand slipped on the blood-slicked floor, and it seemed she had a broken nose. Matthew then grabbed Michelle by the head and slammed it against the floor. Each time he did this, she felt darkness closing in around her, fearing he would knock her out. Michelle was in a state of confusion, thinking, "Is this really happening?" Her head was spinning, and she could hear shuffling noises coming from the kitchen. Suddenly, she felt Matthew approach from behind and stab her in the neck with a knife. Summoning her last bit of strength, Michelle managed to break free for a moment and noticed a door leading to the garage behind her. So Michelle was able to run to it and press the opener with her left hand to try to open the door and escape. The garage door began to open, but it was moving slowly, and she knew she couldn't crawl under it before Matthew reached her again. As she waited for the door to open wide enough, Matthew lunged at her once more, trying to stop her from leaving. They both fell to the ground, and by that time, the garage door had lifted enough for them to roll out onto the driveway. They rolled a bit on the driveway, revealing that Michelle was lying beneath Matthew. He was furious and had both hands on her head, striking it repeatedly against the cement. He still had the knife and stabbed her 3 times in the right shoulder. Throughout this, Michelle screamed for help. At one point, she heard voices from across the street saying, "Leave her alone." But later she couldn't tell who was speaking or what they were discussing. When Matthew lowered the knife, Michelle grabbed the blade and pulled it toward herself. At that moment, Matthew relaxed his grip, causing the knife to fall to Michelle's next side. She hoped that without the knife, he would stop fighting, but he continued to struggle to get it back and kept hitting her head against the road. Matthew started biting Michelle, targeting her shoulder and then her left cheek twice in an attempt to make her release the knife. During the struggle, Michelle screamed for help, pleading with him to stop. Eventually, a neighbor called 911. When Matthew heard the sirens approaching, he released Michelle and ran back into the house. Michelle got up and seized the knife to prevent him from taking it back. Blinded by blood filling her contact lenses, she hurried across the street, following the directions of neighbors who were guiding her with their voices. As soon as Michelle crossed the street, she collapsed in her neighbor's yard. The police discovered Michelle lying in the yard after she had been attacked, suffering from bites, bruises, and multiple stab wounds. Fortunately, she survived but spent 5 challenging days in intensive care before she began to recover. Matthew faced attempted murder charges for his violent actions against Michelle. After his arrest, he reached out to an old friend, Kay Baker, to testify in his defense. Kay, who had dated Matthew nearly 20 years prior, eagerly agreed to support him in court. She informed the jurors that Matthew was honest and could be completely trusted. Michelle desperately tried to make Kay see the monster that Matthew actually was. During the trial, Michelle sent Kay photos of her stab wounds and wrote, "Please don't let this happen to you." But Kay saw in Matthew the man she had known back in those days 20 years ago when they were dating. She wasn't alone in her defense of him. Many of Matthew's friends and family were present in the courtroom, supporting him and shaking their heads in disbelief as they listened to Michelle's testimony. Matthew's lawyer managed to persuade the jurors that Matthew's attack on Michelle was an act of self-defense. The lawyer argued that, as a former Marine, Matthew was using his training to defuse a fight that Michelle had started. Ultimately, Matthew was sentenced to serve 3 to 10 years in prison for assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm. In a letter to the Michigan Parole Board, Michelle expressed her fear for herself, her family, and potential future victims, stating, "If he gets out, I am afraid for myself and my family as well as for the next victim. Society is in danger." Unfortunately, her concerns were ignored, and he served only 3 years before being released for good behavior, having also completed psychotherapy. During his time in prison, Matthew maintained contact with Kay, and after his release, he moved to Florida to start a new life with her. Back to the Kay murder case, Matthew claimed he was not guilty of Kay's murder. However, prosecutors believe that he killed her in a fit of jealousy because he thought she was dancing with another man while they were at a bar. After Kay's murder, an investigator who was part of the team investigating the crime scene following Matthew's attack on Michelle told the press that Matthew Terry was a self-absorbed, manipulative murderer. The trial began in November 2022. Prosecutors worked tirelessly to convince the jurors that Matthew was responsible for Kay Baker's death and sought the death penalty for him. They also believed that Matthew attempted to take his own life after killing Kay. Matthew's lawyers tried to convince the jurors that he and Kay were attacked by an assailant whom Matthew could not identify, and that this perpetrator escaped through a window. The lawyers also argued that the police gave up the chase too quickly because they immediately assumed Matthew was the murderer, thus allowing the real killer to escape. Since the murder weapon was never found, Matthew's lawyers attempted to minimize the importance of the missing kitchen knife by arguing that it could not have caused the injuries to Kay. Matthew's lawyers also worked hard to keep Michelle's case out of the current trial, aware that it could negatively impact the jury's perception of him due to his past violence. However, they were not successful. Michelle was called to testify, and she described the attack she experienced in 2017, which likely influenced the jury's decision. In just 1 hour, the jury reached a unanimous decision, finding Matthew Terry guilty of first-degree murder. Instead of a death sentence, he was given a life sentence. In his final statement, the judge could not hide his emotions, saying, "Given what I've heard, I believe you should have been imprisoned in Michigan. If that had happened, Miss Baker might still be alive. Now, however, you are in Florida, and you will spend the rest of your life in prison. I find you guilty and sentence you to life imprisonment with mandatory statutory fees." The Matthew Terry case is not only a personal tragedy, but it also raises questions about how abusers are treated. Many believe that if the Michigan justice system had taken a more serious look at Matthew's past violent behavior, Kay Baker might not have suffered this fate. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Laurel Mitchell. Laurel Jean Mitchell was born on May 24, 1958. She grew up in a loving and supportive environment with her 2 younger siblings, raised by their parents. The Mitchell family was very friendly, and many neighbors considered them the ideal American family. Despite the challenges they faced, the family remained close and worked together to overcome difficulties. From an early age, Laurel excelled in school and was part of a very religious family. She attended church regularly, with her parents and later with her siblings. Laurel was also creative and talented. She joined the local choir and practiced weekly. She achieved much success, performing with the choir in neighboring cities and participating in various community events. Committed to helping others, Laurel worked at a church camp near her home. Many of the attendees knew her well, having watched her grow up. Laurel was described as a friendly, positive girl, with a gentle yet strong personality. Those close to her believed that she had a bright future ahead, supported by her dedication to her family and community. On the morning of August 6, 1975, Laurel spent time caring for her younger brother and sister while waiting for their parents to return from work. In the afternoon, she was scheduled to go to church camp. Laurel left home around 2 p.m., said goodbye to everyone without incident, and arrived at camp on time, as usual. She was scheduled to work until around 10 p.m. that evening and then planned to go to a local park to relax with friends, which was half a mile from the church. After work, a friend of Laurel's offered to drive her to the park, but she declined, preferring to walk and enjoy the fresh air. About 10 minutes into her walk, she met some friends across the street who were having a good time. Although they waved goodbye, Laurel did not join them because she did not want to be late. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. Meanwhile, her friends were waiting for her at the park. After 20 minutes had passed without Laurel, they began to worry. It was unusual for her to be late, as she was known to be punctual and usually arrived early. Concerned, her friends decided to wait a little longer, thinking that she might simply be running late for church. They waited for her, but after half an hour, they grew impatient and felt a little annoyed by her tardiness. Unable to wait any longer, they decided to go out and have fun without her. Meanwhile, they worried that something might have happened to her. Laurel's family was not worried at first because she had told them that she was going to meet her friends after work and planned to return around midnight, which was her curfew. Her parents allowed her to go out, but as midnight approached and she still had not returned, they began to worry. Both her mother and father became concerned, as did her friends. They realized that Laurel's behavior was unusual. Worried about her well-being, her parents decided to take action instead of waiting. Her mother immediately began trying to find out what had happened to her daughter. Knowing that 17-year-old Laurel was very close to her friends, most of whom lived nearby, her parents decided to contact them despite the late hour, as their worries had grown too great. Laurel's best friend lived right across the street, and they often spent time together. So when Laurel wasn't at her friend's house, her parents were surprised. At that time, her friend had returned home, which raised their concerns. After talking to her friend, Laurel's parents were shocked to learn that she had not gone to the park to meet them and that they had gone for a walk without her. Her parents searched for Laurel along the path she would have taken, but found no sign of her. They planned to go home, hoping that she would be back by then, but she did not return. Worried, the family began calling everyone they knew who might have seen Laurel, despite the late hour. Most people were sympathetic, but unfortunately, no one knew where she was. They eventually decided to call the police to report her missing. Sadly, the police responded with the usual excuses, saying that since Laurel was 17 and was supposed to be with friends, she may have run away due to a conflict with her parents or simply been with someone else. They speculated that she might have had too much to drink and was unable to return home. However, her parents insisted that this behavior was completely out of character for Laurel. Laurel spent most of her time at home and at church, but the police did not listen to their concerns. Determined to find Laurel, her parents and others spent nearly an hour at the police station trying to convince the officers that she would never have missed a meeting with friends or broken curfew. Eventually, the police seemed to take action. By this time, a large group of townspeople were anxious to know what had happened to Laurel. Everyone in the community knew each other, and the idea that a young girl could be in danger in such a quiet town, where nothing like this had ever happened, was shocking. Laurel's parents made a phone call, and a crowd gathered outside the police station, ready to help. Despite the late hour, the people were determined to search for Laurel along with the police. First, they checked the camp near the church, along the route Laurel had taken. However, they found no sign of her along the entire path she might have followed. Then the group split up and searched the city until dawn, but unfortunately, they still found no clues. By 10:30 a.m., the search of the homes of Laurel's friends, whom she was supposed to meet, was nearly complete. The hope that she had simply gone out to have fun had evaporated. Naturally, there was interest in the missing girl's relatives. The Mitchell family had made extensive efforts to identify any potential suspects in Laurel's vicinity. However, they ruled them out, one by one. Laurel had a good social circle, with no signs of cruelty or criminality. Her friends could provide no leads for the investigation. There were no suspicious boyfriends or manipulative individuals in her life, as she had never dated anyone or even thought about boys. There were no jealous suitors who could harm her. Rumors began to spread, and the local community started to pressure the police for answers. Eventually, the police learned that Laurel had met a group of friends about 10 minutes earlier and had passed by them. They reported that they had seen nothing unusual. Laurel seemed happy and was not being followed. So what could have happened to her? A few kilometers north of the city, a man was fishing with his son on the river. Everything seemed calm until he noticed something suspicious floating downstream. Out of curiosity, he decided to row his boat closer. To his horror, he discovered that it was the body of a girl. The man was terrified, thinking that she might have had an accident and drowned. He believed he could still save her, so he pulled her body into the boat and tried to help. However, he soon realized that she was too cold, despite the warm weather. When all his efforts failed, he brought her body to shore with his son. He spotted a passing car and asked the driver to call for help. At the time, Laurel Mitchell's disappearance had not yet been officially reported. Since she had no identification, it was difficult to identify her. The police responded to the call. It turned out that the man and his son were not from the area and did not know Laurel. The police noticed a ring with her initials engraved on her finger. A few hours later, Laurel was officially reported missing, and her initials confirmed her identity. Her parents were able to identify her immediately. Initially, there was an assumption that she may have accidentally fallen off the bridge, slipped, and drowned, possibly due to not knowing how to swim or being intoxicated. However, her parents quickly dismissed these thoughts. They knew that swimming was a regular part of Laurel's training. She had always loved water and enjoyed swimming since childhood, so she could have swum out of the reservoir if she had accidentally fallen in. Additionally, her family and friends confirmed that she had not been drinking. She had not intended to cross the bridge that night, as it was not on her route, making it unlikely that she had accidentally ended up there. Despite this, the police remained skeptical of the family's beliefs. Laurel was found in a large river with a strong current. In some areas, the current is so powerful that even professional swimmers avoid it. According to the police, Laurel may have fallen into the water or gone swimming and become a victim of the current. She may have been swept away and been unable to handle the situation. This theory is supported by the existence of areas marked as too dangerous to swim. Forensic experts were quick to dismiss the police's explanation. Laurel had numerous bruises indicating that she had been beaten, an apparent case of violent death. Many of her injuries appeared to be defensive wounds, particularly on her arms and upper chest. Her face and head were severely injured, suggesting that she had been struck with a blunt object. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma, indicating an attempt to conceal the evidence by dumping her body in the river. The body had been submerged in water for a long time, causing most of the evidence to wash away. The remaining traces could not be thoroughly analyzed because DNA testing was still in its early stages, which caused the investigation to stall. Although the police had some evidence in the form of suspicious biological traces, they were too small to be of any use. All of the items recovered, such as Laurel's clothes, shoes, and underwear that showed these traces, were eventually stored. At the funeral, the church was so crowded that many attendees had to stand outside. People expressed their condolences to Laurel's family and hoped that the case would be solved soon. The investigation soon stalled and only made progress a few months later, when an anonymous witness called the police from a public phone. She claimed to know what had happened to Laurel, but when the police began asking questions, she abruptly hung up and was never found again. The police made a public appeal to find the girl who had called them. They assured her that her identity would be kept confidential and that she would be safe, providing any protection she might need. They urged her to contact them again and share any information she had. To encourage her, they even offered a reward of $50,000, a substantial sum at the time. Despite this, the girl did not call back. Unfortunately, the reward led to trouble, as the police received some false information, wasting resources on unnecessary investigations. 6 months after Laurel's death, a woman contacted the police. She lived across the street from where Laurel had walked to the park that evening. She reported seeing Laurel at 10:15 p.m., the same time she was returning from work. While she was at home, she heard a strange noise outside. It sounded like a car had stopped suddenly in front of her house, followed by the screams of young people. When she looked out the window, she saw one of the trunks slam shut. Laurel, who had disappeared from view for a moment, was seen by a housewife. The housewife noticed a red car with strange young men inside, who quickly drove away. Although she could not see the faces or the license plate, she provided a description of the car. It was a bright red car, quite recognizable at the time. The police were very interested in this information and began investigating all the car owners matching that description. However, for a month, they found no clues, much to the frustration of the police and Laurel's family. The investigation hit a dead end again. Decades later, in the early 2010s, advances in technology and methods, including genetic analysis, allowed for a more thorough examination of the available evidence. Profiling techniques were also used, leading to the creation of a psychological profile of the suspect. FBI agents were even brought in to assist. The profiler suggested that the suspect was likely a young man who lived in or near the area, had a history of violent crime, and possibly a criminal record. Despite these efforts, the investigation into Laurel's case made little progress. The DNA samples from the evidence were too limited to be analyzed comprehensively, hampering the police's efforts to solve the crime. During this time, a team was formed to tackle unsolved cases. Finally, the case of Laurel Mitchell came to the attention of her elderly parents. They once again expressed their desire to confront the brutal criminal who had beaten their innocent daughter to death. The police chose to restart the investigation, ignoring all the controversial conclusions from over 30 years ago. Sadly, Laurel's parents died before the police could answer their long-standing questions. As of 2012, the culprit remains unidentified. After the tragedy, Laurel's brother and sister were determined to continue their fight for justice. They believed that the media could help promote their efforts, so they issued several news reports about the investigation, which had been ongoing for nearly 4 years. A few months into their media campaign, they began to see progress with the police. A woman who had lived in the area in 1975 and was the same age as Laurel came forward to share her story. About a week after Laurel's murder, she had met a man named John Wayne Lehman at a party, and they had begun a long-term relationship. At another party, John confessed to her about a traumatic incident that had occurred that summer. He revealed that he had witnessed his friend attacking a girl on the street and felt helpless because he could not intervene. John gave a detailed account of the crime, but maintained that he did not kill Laurel. Instead, he claimed that it was his friend. At the time, she did not believe him. When she went to the police station and repeated what John had said, the police became interested. The information she provided about the attack and murder included details that had not been reported in the media, raising suspicions. Despite this, the investigation remained challenging. The woman mentioned that she had broken up with John shortly after his confession and that she did not know about his current situation. He was not listed in the police database, indicating that he had no legal problems. The police sought to identify John's friend. The woman struggled to remember her friend's name. To help her recall, the police provided her with a list of former suspects and potential witnesses in the case. She recognized the name Fred Bandy Jr. 2 years after Laurel's death, a young man came to the police station, stating that he had met Fred, who had no stable home, job, or education. He described Fred as having an anger problem that he could not control. During one of their meetings, Fred confided in him that a friend named John had attacked a girl on the street for no reason. When the girl fought back, Fred became angry and started hitting her. He continued to attack her even after she passed out and fell to the ground. Fred claimed that he lost control at that point, which ultimately led to the girl's death. To cover up their crime, they dumped the girl's body in the river. At the time, the police did not take the young man's testimony seriously because he could not provide the girl's name, making it impossible to verify his account. Initially, the police ignored the situation, but eventually remembered it. However, they did not take action because they could not verify his testimony. After reviewing the report, the police discovered that John Wayne Lehman and Fred Bandy Jr. were involved in the case. Now, the police decided to take a closer look at the main suspects. However, at this time, they still had no information about John or Fred. Finally, the police had advanced technology that could analyze even the smallest traces. In 2019, they decided to test all the evidence collected from Laurel's murder, including her clothes, shoes, underwear, and a ring. Contrary to expectations, the testing process took nearly a year, even with these improved methods. In February 2020, a major breakthrough occurred when forensic scientists discovered microscopic traces on Laurel's clothing that had gone unnoticed for decades. The authorities had enough samples from Fred, who had a history of violent crimes, and his DNA was stored in a database. They needed time to compare these samples. Unfortunately, the initial results only showed an 80% match, which was not conclusive enough, so the investigation continued. After conducting further analysis using different methods, they achieved a near 100% match with Fred's samples. Finally, in 2023, the decision was made to arrest Fred Bandy Jr. and his friend John Wayne Lehman. Police noted that Fred had a history of 3 violent crimes, all targeting young girls, but he had only been convicted of one of these crimes. Fred served a short sentence and was released. He has now admitted to attacking Laurel Mitchell and mentioned that his friend John owned a red car in 1975. He tried to blame John but could not explain why only his DNA was found on Laurel's body. Both men were arrested nearly 48 years after Laurel's murder. Laurel's younger brother and sister struggled to understand how the killers were able to live freely while the police failed to catch them all these years. It was expected that they would accuse each other. Fred blamed John for everything, while John insisted that Fred was responsible for abusing and killing Laurel and drowning her. He denied any involvement in the murder, claiming that his fear of Fred had prevented him from intervening or speaking up until now. After hearing arguments from both sides, the jury reached a decision. Within an hour, they found Fred Bandy Jr. guilty of first-degree murder. At the time, Fred was 69 years old. At the sentencing hearing that followed, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. It is important to note that Fred was tried under a 1975 law. At that time, he could have faced life in prison with the possibility of parole or the death penalty. However, the death penalty has since been abolished in that state. As a result, Fred will spend the rest of his life in prison. John Wayne Lehman, who was 68 years old when he was arrested in Indiana, negotiated a deal with the prosecution by pleading guilty to conspiracy to commit murder. Because of his cooperation, John was sentenced to only 8 years in prison, with the possibility of parole. In exchange for this leniency, John had to testify for the prosecution during the trial. After the murderers were convicted, Laurel's 62-year-old younger sister released balloons into the sky that read, "We got him." This allowed the family to celebrate a long-overdue victory for justice. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Jennifer Clark. Donald Clark, 40, and Jennifer Clark, 30, are a married couple living in the small town of Zebulon, Georgia, USA. For a time, their life together seemed happy. They have 2 sons together, and Donald also has an adult daughter from a previous relationship. Donald and Jennifer met in 1996 when Jennifer was 18. Despite a 10-year age gap, they quickly connected and got married in 1997. The following year, they welcomed their first son, and 2 years later, their second son was born. The family settled in Zebulon, a quiet rural town. Donald has always been a hardworking man. He dropped out of high school and started working immediately at a local factory. Over time, he pursued further education and advanced his career within the same company. Jennifer, on the other hand, worked as a nurse at a nursing home. Like any marriage, their relationship seemed harmonious at first. However, after the birth of their children, things began to change. Donald's daughter noticed that Jennifer was increasingly critical of him. When Donald's daughter became old enough, she decided to move out of the house. She chose to live with her grandparents due to Jennifer's erratic behavior. Unable to wait until adulthood to leave, she moved out early to escape the conflicts caused by her stepmother. For a while, Donald's daughter lived in Florida, but at 19, she became pregnant. She decided to move back in with her father for support. During this time, Jennifer and Donald appeared to be rebuilding their relationship. However, by the time the baby was born, Donald's daughter noticed that her father's relationship with Jennifer had deteriorated again. As before, the house was filled with arguments, and Jennifer continued to pressure and humiliate Donald. Once again, Donald's daughter was forced to move out. Many people advised Donald to end the marriage, but he hesitated because he appreciated Jennifer's housekeeping skills and her role in their daily lives. In early 2008, the couple moved into a new home in the same town. Around the same time, Michael Yost, the 22-year-old son of Donald's best friend Charlie, moved in with them. Michael had serious legal problems, had dropped out of school, and had begun using illegal drugs, which led to more charges and increased police surveillance. Hoping to help Michael turn his life around, Donald invited him to live with them. Jennifer quickly became close to Michael, which soon aroused Donald's suspicions. Eventually, Donald directly asked Michael if he was having an affair with Jennifer. Michael admitted to the affair. This revelation did not seem to surprise Donald, as Jennifer had been unfaithful to him on several previous occasions. Despite her repeated infidelity, Donald always forgave Jennifer, hoping to keep their marriage intact for the sake of their children. After learning about the affair, Donald asked Michael to move out of their home. Donald began to wonder what more he could do to make his wife happy. He provided for her and their children, was a loving husband, and a devoted father. However, it became clear to everyone that the problem was not Donald, but Jennifer. Donald decided to have an honest conversation with Jennifer about their problems. They finally came to the conclusion that it was time to separate. Over the next few days, they thought it over and ultimately agreed that divorce was the best decision. Everything seemed normal, with no signs of trouble. However, on the night of March 7, Donald woke up to find a sheet covering his face. He quickly threw the sheet off and was nearly hit in the head with a baseball bat that his wife Jennifer was holding. Donald immediately called the police to report his wife's unprovoked aggressive behavior. However, when the police arrived, he calmed down and decided he didn't want Jennifer to face legal consequences, so he withdrew the complaint. The incident, nonetheless, left an impression on the police. The next day, Donald went to court and filed for divorce. Jennifer left the house and moved in with Michael. At the time, Michael was living with his grandmother. Jennifer moved in with him, leaving the children in Donald's care. The breakup seemed to work out for everyone. During this time, Donald's friends noticed that he began to do much better. Eventually, life started to improve for him. Meanwhile, Jennifer told her family about her new relationship with Michael, and they were harshly critical. Her mother called it the stupidest decision she had ever made, claiming that Jennifer had left a wonderful husband and family for someone who wasn't worth it. By the spring of 2008, Donald and Jennifer had separated, but were still not divorced. During this time, Donald focused on his work and devoted all of his free time to caring for their two sons. Raising the boys alone was a challenge for him, so he decided to hire a live-in nanny. The nanny, Danielle Young, was a single mother in her 20s with two children from previous failed relationships. Donald met Danielle at a bar shortly after his separation. She immediately caught his attention, and they spent the evening talking. A few weeks later, Donald offered her a position as a babysitter for his children. Their relationship soon developed into a romantic one. During this time, unexpected problems arose. Jennifer discovered she was pregnant, but couldn't be sure whether the father was Donald or Michael. A DNA test was required to determine paternity. Jennifer decided to share the news with Donald. She went to his home, unaware that he had hired Danielle as a babysitter. Despite their separation, Jennifer became enraged when she saw another woman in the house. She stormed in, causing a scene, screaming and arguing. She then grabbed a baseball bat, threatened to harm Donald, and left the house. Danielle was shocked by the events that unfolded. She feared not only for her own safety, but also for the safety of her children. She became convinced that Jennifer was a threat to her sons. During the summer, Danielle decided to move away from Donald, partly because of their 17-year age gap. Meanwhile, Jennifer and Donald's divorce was finalized in July 2008. At the same time, a paternity test revealed that the child Jennifer was carrying was actually Michael's. Living conditions at Michael's grandmother's house were poor. Unfortunately, neither Jennifer nor Michael could afford to move out. A few months later, the couple moved into Donald's sister's house. She is very close to Donald and was surprised when he asked her to let Jennifer and Michael stay with. However, she agreed to help. Donald was likely trying to reconcile with Jennifer. He kept insisting that the boys needed a mother and repeatedly tried to convince her to reunite and rebuild the family. However, Jennifer continued to refuse until October 2008. She eventually agreed to Donald's proposal and decided to return. She had come to realize that Michael was a failure. As both a husband and a father, he did not work, had no money, and their family lived in poverty. This ultimately led her to return to Donald. After her return, Jennifer resumed managing the household, taking care of the children, and handling daily responsibilities. Donald continued to work hard and spent his free time with his sons. Notably, he even accepted Jennifer's unborn child with Michael as his own and planned to raise the child as part of the family. Despite their reconciliation, it was evident to everyone that the couple's relationship was extremely toxic and even worse than it had been before the divorce. Nevertheless, Donald stubbornly clung to the illusion of a happy family life. Meanwhile, Michael came home from work to find Jennifer gone. She had left, taking all her belongings without saying a word. Later, Michael discovered that she had returned to her ex-husband, Donald. This devastated him, as he had been confident in the life they were building together and had even planned their future. In desperation, Michael begged her to come back. The situation became tense and unpredictable, with the potential to spiral out of control at any moment. On November 19, 2008, just before Thanksgiving, Donald's sister began to worry about him, as she had not heard from him for several days. While this might not have been a concern for most people, it was unusual for Donald, who was always in constant contact with his family. His complete silence raised red flags. Unable to reach him directly, she contacted Jennifer, who claimed she had no idea where Donald was. Following their conversation, Donald's sister went to the police to report him missing. Officers visited Donald's home and spoke with Jennifer. She explained that she had last seen him the previous night and had not noticed anything unusual. According to Jennifer, Donald had come home after work, had dinner, watched TV, and gone to bed. The next morning, he left for work as usual. Jennifer claimed they had exchanged text messages during his shift while she was taking the kids to school. Donald had read and responded to her messages. She then spent the rest of the day doing chores, but Donald did not return home at his usual time. She said she had no idea where he could be, and noted that his phone, wallet, papers, and car were all missing. Jennifer speculated that he might have run away. Donald's sister, however, strongly disagreed. She believed that such behavior was completely out of character for Donald. She knew he had done everything he could to make the relationship work, that he always put his family first, and that he would never consider running away. While gathering more information, Donald's sister discovered that he had been seeing a woman named Danielle. This revelation shifted the police's focus. They began to consider the possibility that Donald had left to escape his toxic relationship with Jennifer and was now with Danielle. Based on these details, the police concluded that Donald might have left to pursue happiness and would eventually return. Donald's sister refused to give up. She printed flyers and distributed them widely. Although the search yielded no results, it prompted the police to take further action. They noted that Donald had not committed any crimes or made any bank transactions since his disappearance. Additionally, his cell phone had not been used. These details led the police to suspect that he had not simply run away. Police began piecing together a timeline of events from the day he went missing. However, witness testimonies were inconsistent, making it impossible to determine the exact time of his disappearance. Donald's boss shared an intriguing story about him. According to the boss, Donald was determined to repair his relationship with Danielle. However, he discovered that Danielle was pregnant with another man's child. Although her relationship with the baby's father had ended, Danielle chose to keep the baby and was navigating the challenges of motherhood. Donald, who often confided in his boss, revealed just days before his disappearance that he wanted to end his toxic relationship with Jennifer and was considering starting a family with Danielle. Donald's sudden disappearance left his workplace baffled. He stopped showing up to work, didn't contact anyone, and ignored all attempts to reach him. This behavior was completely out of character for Donald, who was known for being responsible and punctual. He had recently been promoted and was putting more effort into his job, making it hard to believe he would abandon everything without explanation. Hoping to find Donald safe, the police went to Danielle's house. However, Danielle told them she hadn't seen or been able to contact him. She became very distressed when the police informed her of his disappearance. Danielle confirmed that both she and Donald had wanted to reconcile and that she had been waiting for him. She fully cooperated with the investigation, providing an alibi that was verified, ruling her out as a suspect. The police explored various scenarios to uncover a motive for Donald's disappearance, but found no explanation or trace of him. As time passed, the likelihood of finding him alive grew slim. On November 25, 2008, Jennifer gave birth to a son. Around the same time, the police obtained a search warrant for Donald's home. What they found in the master bedroom was disturbing. The room smelled strongly of cleaning products, and the bed appeared unusually clean, as though it had been scrubbed with a strong solution. The mattress and sheets were brand new, and the wall behind the headboard had also been scrubbed. However, only certain areas of the room had been cleaned. The wallpaper on one wall was noticeably faded and white, in stark contrast to the rest of the room, which was dusty and cluttered. Jennifer claimed she had cleaned the room to prepare for her son's birth, but her explanation didn't add up. Only one wall had been cleaned, while the rest of the house remained messy. Forensic experts examined the scene and found microscopic drops of blood. When questioned, Jennifer admitted there might be blood in the room, explaining that her 3 young children often fought and could have injured themselves, causing nosebleeds. She claimed her cleaning efforts were simply part of maintaining the room. However, her explanation raised doubts. Why had she focused on cleaning just one wall while leaving the rest of the house untouched? It seemed clear she had attempted to hide evidence and was now trying to mislead the investigation. Despite their suspicions, the police couldn't get Jennifer to confess. The police decided to question her children, who provided important details about the night Donald went missing. The teens mentioned that their mother had slept in the bedroom with their father that night. Later, they were awakened by the sound of someone running on the first floor. When they got up to investigate, they discovered that the back door of the house was wide open, which was unusual for their family. The children admitted they did not fully understand what had happened. Their mother, Jennifer, avoided discussing the incident. However, their testimony supported Jennifer's alibi, suggesting that she was unlikely to be involved in Donald's disappearance. The police then shifted their focus to other suspects, particularly Michael. He had a clear motive, as his girlfriend Jennifer had recently reconciled with Donald, her ex-husband. Several neighbors reported seeing Michael's pickup truck near Donald's house that evening. Michael was arrested and questioned, but the police obtained no useful information from him. He was later released, though he remained the prime suspect in the case. A significant breakthrough in the investigation occurred on December 23, when a random witness contacted the police station to report an unusual discovery. While walking his dog, the witness noticed the animal chewing on something. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was a wallet containing Donald's ID. Authorities quickly responded and noted that the discovery site was near Michael's mother's house. This prompted the police to conduct a thorough search of the surrounding area. During their search, they found a baseball bat and several other items along the road. Based on these findings, the investigation was expanded to include the area near Michael's mother's home. A nearby field drew the attention of the police. After approximately an hour of searching through bushes, police found a camouflage tarp concealed beneath layers of leaves and branches. Something was wrapped inside. When they opened it, they discovered a body, its head encased in a plastic bag, wrapped in the tarp. Tattoos on the body allowed police to identify it as Donald Clark. The cause of death was determined to be multiple blunt force traumas to the head. One detail stood out to investigators: Donald was wearing pajamas. This finding contradicted Jennifer's earlier claim that Donald had gone to work. It appeared that he had been killed while sleeping in bed. Michael and Jennifer were preparing to celebrate Christmas together when police arrested them. Jennifer showed no signs of grief over her ex-husband's death and seemed content with her life with Michael. However, during a subsequent interrogation, Jennifer completely changed her story. She admitted that she had initially been sleeping in the same bed with Donald on the morning he went missing. At some point, Jennifer claimed, she awoke to find Michael standing over Donald, holding something in his hand. Terrified, Jennifer panicked and ran to her son's room, locking the door from the inside. The commotion woke the children, and from inside the locked room, Jennifer said she could hear Michael beating Donald to death with a baseball bat. After the attack, Jennifer claimed that Michael knocked on the bedroom door and demanded her help cleaning the scene. She stated that she complied out of fear for her own safety, believing she might be his next victim. Jennifer accused Michael of being a manipulative and abusive person who had kept her under oppressive control. She admitted that they cleaned the bedroom walls with bleach and replaced the blood-stained sheets and mattress with new ones. Jennifer said she later helped Michael carry Donald's body to the car, where Michael wrapped Donald's head in a plastic bag to minimize the amount of blood left at the crime scene. Michael, however, provided a completely different account. He denied Jennifer's allegations and claimed that she had never truly ended their relationship. According to Michael, Jennifer wanted to reconcile with Donald only to obtain financial benefits from him. He maintained that he and Jennifer were still seeing each other regularly and stated that, on the night of the murder, Jennifer called him around 1 a.m., asking to meet for intimacy. Michael alleged that Jennifer used a flashlight to signal him when he arrived at the house, indicating it was safe to enter. She supposedly assured Michael that Donald would not be home. However, when Michael entered the house, he claimed he found Donald asleep in the bedroom. Jennifer took an aluminum baseball bat from the closet and repeatedly struck Donald in the head. She then begged Michael to help dispose of the body and clean up the blood. Feeling he had no choice, Michael agreed. He later claimed that Jennifer was a dangerous manipulator who had controlled him throughout their relationship. Michael admitted to helping move the body out of town and scattering Donald's belongings in various locations. However, he kept Donald's cell phone. They used it to send text messages to Jennifer, pretending Donald was still alive. After conflicting interviews, both were arrested and charged with the premeditated murder of Donald Clark. Police believed they had planned the crime together. Michael was also charged with planting evidence to mislead the investigation. Jennifer's lawyers immediately contested the charges, arguing that she was 9 months pregnant at the time and unlikely to have beaten a grown man to death without assistance. Facing the possibility of the death penalty, Michael opted for a plea bargain with the prosecution. He admitted to complicity in planning the murder, destroying evidence, and obstructing the investigation. In exchange for his testimony against Jennifer, he received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 30 years. The trial, delayed several times, finally began on January 31, 2011. The prosecution's star witness was Michael. He testified that on the night of the murder, Jennifer had called him, saying she wanted to leave Donald. Michael initially refused to help. Later, Jennifer called again, saying she had packed her bags and needed to be picked up. When Michael arrived, Jennifer attacked Donald and killed him with a baseball bat. Michael also revealed that Jennifer had threatened to cut ties with him if he didn't help cover up the crime and dispose of the body, which prompted his involvement. Several witnesses described Jennifer as argumentative and confrontational. After less than an hour of deliberation, the jury found Jennifer Clark guilty on all counts, including murder and tampering with evidence. She was sentenced to life in prison plus 60 years. Both defendants are currently serving sentences in state prisons. All of Jennifer's appeals have been denied. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Orville Fleming. Sarah June Douglas was born on August 4, 1987 in Sacramento, California, into a family with 5 siblings. As a child, she was a sweet, sociable, and cheerful girl with a deep love for nature. She had a particular fondness for animals, especially dogs and birds, and enjoyed spending time in the garden planting and caring for plants. However, her teenage years marked a dramatic change. Sarah became rebellious and mischievous, dropped out of school, abandoned her previous hobbies, and began spending most of her time with friends and attending parties. At the age of 19, she entered into a tumultuous relationship with a man and eventually became pregnant. In 2007, at the age of 20, Sarah gave birth to a son. Unfortunately, the child's birth did not resolve the conflicts between Sarah and her boyfriend, and they eventually decided to separate. Sarah had to adapt to life as a single mother with no formal education or career while taking care of her child. Over time, making ends meet became increasingly difficult, as finding a steady job that could support both her and her son proved to be a challenge. Although her mother and sister provided some support, Sarah continued to struggle financially. Eventually, she turned to providing intimate services on escort websites. Her sister described Sarah as a good person who made poor decisions, and this was one of the worst. While Sarah was able to alleviate her financial difficulties, this choice also exposed her to new and far more dangerous problems. After spending a few years working in the escort industry, Sarah met Orville Fleming, who provided financial stability and a secure home. Wanting to ensure a better future for her son, Sarah saw Orville as the salvation she had been hoping for. Orville Fleming, born on June 26, 1958 in California, had lived what appeared to be an exemplary life for over 30 years. He was a husband, father, and a dedicated firefighter with over 24 years of service. Due to his outstanding performance and leadership skills, Orville became a battalion chief. Orville also worked as an instructor at the fire academy. His career was flourishing, and his impeccable record qualified him for a substantial pension. Many considered Orville and Megan Fleming, his wife, who had been married for 30 years, to be the epitome of a successful, typical American couple. Together, they raised 2 children who had grown into responsible, successful adults. However, behind his seemingly perfect life, Orville was hiding a dark secret. A significant portion of his income was spent on one of his private indulgences, hiring escort services that he found on internet platforms. Despite being seen as a devoted husband and a dedicated civil servant in his 50s, Orville sought out intimate encounters with young women. On one of these websites, Orville met Sarah, a 24-year-old attractive young woman. Orville was immediately drawn to her during their first meeting. At the time, Sarah was using a different name on the website and charging $300 an hour for her services. It is said that during their meetings, Sarah gained Orville's trust by sharing stories about her difficult life as a single mother. Moved by her struggles, their relationship quickly developed. Orville became deeply infatuated with Sarah, to the point of obsession. Orville continued to care for Sarah and her son, but he felt that it was not enough. After some time, he suggested that they move in together, promising to leave his wife, marry Sarah, and take care of her child. True to his word, Orville divorced his first wife, Megan, and moved in with Sarah and her son in a house located in a quiet neighborhood in Fox River, south of Sacramento. Sarah shared with her family how happy she was with the changes in her life. Although her parents were initially concerned about the significant age gap between Sarah and Orville, they supported her and believed she had made the right choice. The new house also became a home for birds, as Sarah had loved them since childhood and could now devote her time to caring for them. She had quit her previous job to focus on taking care of Orville and her son. Their plans for marriage began when Orville gave Sarah an engagement ring with a large diamond. However, their relationship soon began to deteriorate. Orville became possessive and extremely jealous. Knowing that Sarah was financially dependent on him, he used this to his advantage to control her and ensure she stayed by his side. After living together for 2 years, Sarah grew increasingly frustrated with her fiancé, who displayed obsessive and controlling behavior. She also frequently clashed with Megan, who was still Orville's legal wife despite him filing for divorce on October 24. Sarah's patience was wearing thin, and she began calling Megan repeatedly, even demanding that Megan pay off Orville's debt for the escort services Sarah claimed to have provided him. As 2014 approached, Orville and Sarah's relationship had deteriorated significantly. Sarah began spending more time with her mother and sister, confiding in them that she was seriously considering ending her relationship with Orville. Little did she know that her decision to leave would lead to a devastating tragedy. On Wednesday, April 30, 2014, Sarah sent her son to stay with his father for a few days and decided to spend time with her mother and sister. The 3 women went to a casino where they stayed until 11 p.m. During this time, Orville repeatedly called and texted Sarah. Around midnight, Sarah's sister dropped her off at the house she shared with Orville, not realizing it would be the last time she would see her sister alive. When Sarah entered the house, she immediately sensed something was wrong. A strong smell of gas filled the air. She quickly turned off the gas in the kitchen and called her sister, telling her that Orville had left the gas on, possibly in an attempt to harm her birds. While they were talking, Sarah's sister suddenly heard her scream, apparently startled by someone entering the room. Moments later, her sister heard Orville's voice, followed by the sound of arguing and Sarah's terrified scream. Thinking it was just another one of their usual arguments, her sister went to bed, planning to check on Sarah the next morning. The next morning, Sarah's sister tried calling her several times but received no response. At 8 a.m., Sarah's sister and aunt decided to go to her house. They knocked on the door, but no one answered. Noticing that the door was unlocked, they cautiously entered the living room, only to find the house in disarray, with objects scattered everywhere. Feeling uneasy, they went to the master bedroom. What they found there horrified them so much that they ran out of the house in a panic. A neighbor, alarmed by the screams of Sarah's sister and aunt, quickly called 911 to report the incident. By 9 a.m., the police had arrived at the scene. Inside, they immediately noticed signs of a struggle. In the bedroom, they found a body lying face down on the floor next to the bed. The victim had visible stab wounds, and a cloth-like material was tied around her neck. The window shutters were closed, and no one else was in the house. The police quickly secured the area, called in forensic experts to collect evidence, and transported the young woman's body to the morgue. Sarah's sister and aunt were questioned and promptly identified the victim as Sarah June Douglas, 26. An autopsy revealed that Sarah had been attacked with a knife, possibly a kitchen knife. There were also clear signs of strangulation on her neck, along with bruises on her body, which indicated physical violence. Laboratory tests found no traces of alcohol or foreign substances in her system. Police learned from Sarah's sister that she lived with Orville and that their relationship had recently become strained. That night, Sarah had allegedly told Orville that she intended to end the relationship. Using details Sarah's sister overheard during a phone call, police began reconstructing the events that led to Sarah's tragic death. Orville Fleming became the prime suspect in Sarah's murder, leading to an arrest warrant being issued against him. However, Orville disappeared, and efforts to locate him were unsuccessful. A statewide search was conducted, and his official vehicle was found not far from his home, but his whereabouts remained a mystery. During the investigation, police discovered that Orville was in possession of 2 handguns that were missing from the scene. As a result, they warned the public that he was considered armed and extremely dangerous. Flyers were widely distributed, urging people to report any suspicious individuals. The police search continued for several days, with special units involved. Meanwhile, at the house where Sarah had died, relatives, friends, and acquaintances gathered to pay their respects and offer condolences to her family. The media closely followed the search and provided regular updates. On May 2, the police decided to reenact the events of that tragic night. Orville's relatives and colleagues were invited to participate, and those who knew him were shocked by his alleged involvement in such a terrible crime. They had always known him to be a kind, positive, and cheerful person, which made the accusations even harder to believe. A week after Orville disappeared, he was removed from his post due to being absent from work for more than 5 days. Meanwhile, the police redirected their search to remote areas of California where Orville might have traveled. They speculated that, as a nature enthusiast who frequently hiked in hard-to-reach areas, Orville might possess survival skills suited to such environments. During the ongoing search, Orville's wife Megan made a startling revelation. She claimed that Orville and other members of the California Fire Department had used escort services at the fire station. Megan stated that she had seen a video showing firefighters with women, including one identified as Sarah, inside the station's fire truck. However, when police searched the home Orville and Sarah shared, they found no such videos or photos. Megan went on to report that Sarah had been demanding money from her for the past 4 years to pay debts related to intimate services. Megan claimed that the situation escalated after Sarah discovered that the diamond ring Orville had given her was, in fact, a fake. After 2 weeks of intensive searching, Orville, a former fire battalion commander, was finally arrested on May 26, 2014. He was found at a bus stop near the woods where he had abandoned his car, suggesting that he had been hiding in the woods the entire time. When he attempted to catch a bus to get food, he was arrested without resistance. On May 20, 2014, Orville Fleming appeared in court. He claimed that he could not afford a lawyer and refused to plead guilty. 10 days later, the California Highway Patrol announced an investigation into alleged misconduct involving members of the fire department where Orville had worked. In October 2014, 4 months after the murder, Orville formally pleaded not guilty. Sarah's family, particularly her mother, was outraged by Orville's arrogance, as he even winked at his lawyer while proclaiming his innocence. Her family informed the court about Sarah's troubled relationship with Orville, describing him as a jealous and controlling husband who had forbidden her from working. At the same time, an investigation was launched into the fire academy where Orville had been an instructor. On December 29, 2014, evidence of misconduct was uncovered, resulting in the suspension of 16 firefighters. In June 2015, Orville's lawyers began their defense by attempting to portray him in the best possible light. They argued that he was a victim of manipulation by an escort service employee with a history of substance abuse. The defense claimed that the woman had exploited Orville for her own benefit until he reached his breaking point. They also asserted that he had amnesia and could not recall the attack itself. Through this narrative, the defense hoped to secure a reduced sentence. The next day, Orville alleged that Sarah was an alcoholic, used illegal drugs, and frequently yelled at and humiliated him. On the night of the incident, he claimed they had a heated argument, after which he lost control. He stated that he went into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, returned to the room, pinned Sarah down on the bed, and stabbed and strangled her. Orville claimed he could not remember all the details of the incident and later expressed shock, saying he could not believe he had killed the woman he intended to marry. He also revealed that while on the run, he had attempted end life 3 times. Finally, the prosecutor presented their case. During questioning, Orville claimed he did not remember what had happened. However, the police had a recording from his arrest in which Orville clearly confessed that he had stabbed Sarah because she insulted him. The prosecution argued that Orville had sufficient time to comprehend his actions, making him eligible for first-degree murder charges. On June 24, 2015, Orville Fleming was convicted of second-degree murder. On July 31, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 16 years. Orville's crime not only deprived Sarah's 5-year-old son of the chance to grow up with his mother, but also exposed him to a media frenzy due to speculation about his mother's past. To shield the boy from public scrutiny and hostility, his father relocated him to Santa Rosa. Sarah's family suffered 2 devastating tragedies. First, Sarah's death shattered their hearts. Then, just months after Sarah's death, her brother, to whom she was very close, took his own life, unable to cope with the immense pain of losing her in such horrific circumstances. For Sarah's family, her death at the hands of a man she had been with for years was a stark warning to end abusive relationships before it was too late. It also highlighted that seemingly respectable and socially respected people can sometimes be far worse than those who are shunned. Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case, the case of Susan Bailey. Susan was born in 1965 in a small town in Minnesota, USA. She was an ordinary, carefree girl who easily made friends and was sociable. Partly due to having many siblings, her parents had 4 children in total. Susan was smart, did well in school, and was responsible and non-confrontational. From a young age, her parents taught her the importance of independence and hard work. After graduating from high school, Susan enrolled in a local college. To avoid burdening her parents financially while paying for her education, she took a job as a saleswoman. It seemed like everything was falling into place for her. However, she never enjoyed the cold and gray weather of Minnesota and dreamed of moving south. After completing her studies, she decided to relocate to another state. This decision led Susan to the sunny beaches of California, fulfilling her childhood dream. There, she quickly found a job in retail and met a man, Mr. Bailey, who would become her husband. He was calm and reserved, pursuing a military career. They married in 1988. Although Susan's family disapproved of her choice due to the challenges of Mr. Bailey's profession, they ultimately accepted her decision. In the following years, they moved several times because of her husband's military service. While he worked, Susan spent most of her time at home and felt unhappy with this lifestyle. However, he promised to leave the military after his contract ended, which he did in 1990. They then returned to California, and Susan decided to become pregnant with their first child, a girl named Jennifer. 4 years later, they welcomed another child. They chose to focus on their careers to support their growing family. During this time, Susan found success in her retail career and became the primary breadwinner, while her husband struggled in his job. They switched roles, with him taking on the role of a stay-at-home dad, and Susan working to provide for the family. This change was made possible when Susan accepted a job with a new clothing company. In 1997, she was promoted to Regional Manager of Texas, which came with significant responsibilities. Susan realized she couldn't turn down this opportunity. She and the children relocated to Texas, where they decided to settle in a small town called Denton. In 2000, the Bailey family purchased a house with 4 bedrooms, a living room, and a separate playroom in the small town. It seemed like a perfect place for a peaceful family life. As Susan became part of the local community, she met her neighbors. They had children of school age and lived across the street. They spent a lot of time together, discussing local news. However, Susan later discovered something troubling. Whenever Jennifer visited the neighbor, she would leave with items in her hands. After these visits, the neighboring family noticed that money and belongings were missing, leading them to suspect that Jennifer was stealing. Despite this, her neighbor never brought up her concerns with Susan, possibly thinking that Susan was too busy with work and did not want to burden her with additional problems. As a result, the relationship with the neighbors became strained. Susan's son David faced several challenges. He struggled with bedwetting, which required her to change the bedding nearly every day, causing her stress. Additionally, David had behavioral issues and frequently got into trouble. However, these problems were minor compared to the bankruptcy of Susan's company, which led to her losing her job and significant income, severely impacting their family. At that time, she had started her own small cosmetic shop, but it did not compensate for the loss of her managerial position in a large firm. Eventually, she found work at another clothing store, but her new salary was much lower than her previous earnings. During this period, Susan realized her independence, while her husband struggled to find a job to support her. Their relationship became strained, and by 2006, they officially divorced. It remains unclear why her husband did not take any initiative to fight for custody of their children or their assets. He simply left everything to Susan without hesitation and agreed to pay child support. Susan was struggling with her own problems as well as those of her son and daughter, and everything seemed to be getting worse. For the first time, she felt overwhelmed by her new responsibilities. At the same time, she had to work 2 jobs to keep the family financially stable and avoid debt. This left her with little time to spend with her children. Susan was hardly ever home, and the children felt neglected. David was falling behind in school, skipping classes, and even resorting to self-harm in an attempt to get his mother's attention. His sister Jennifer took care of him, but she felt uncomfortable in that role and wanted to enjoy her own life instead. She often expressed her frustration about this. During this time, Jennifer met a boy named Paul Henson, who was a year younger than her. He lived with his family in a trailer park. Paul mentioned that he came from a troubled family, which resonated with Jennifer as she could relate to his struggles. However, Paul was quite unusual. He believed he had 2 distinct personalities. He described one of his 2 personalities as a reincarnation of a 10th century executioner. referring to it as his evil alter ego. Many of his classmates noticed Paul talking to himself, conversing with imaginary people and speaking in languages no one understood. He spent most of his free time playing fantasy computer games. Despite his unusual behavior, Paul genuinely liked Jennifer, and they started dating. Jennifer thought his eccentricities were just a product of his vivid imagination and gradually began to share his interests, playing the same games and acting oddly. For instance, they wore dog collars with each other's names. They also engaged in dark mystical practices, which eventually led to a love triangle. Paul revealed to Jennifer that one of his personalities was fond of her, while another personality of his had feelings for a girl named Marilee. Marilee was a 14-year-old from a wealthy family who appeared naive and impressionable. Marilee and Jennifer both fell under his influence, believing they all had mutual feelings for each other, leading to a complicated emotional situation. Susan Bailey strongly disliked Paul from the start and encouraged her daughter to end her relationship with the unusual Paul. However, Jennifer refused to heed her family's warnings. As a result, both their relationship and the home environment worsened quickly. Despite being told not to communicate with Paul, Jennifer was seen with him during the day when all the adults were home. Additionally, Jennifer regularly ignored her mother's requests regarding her schoolwork, chores, and taking care of David. Jennifer got a job at a fast food restaurant, which meant she was hardly ever home. This worried Susan, as David was often left unsupervised. To help, Susan's parents agreed to take David in for the month of July. During this time, they noticed an improvement in his behavior. They taught him household chores and introduced him to activities like fishing. However, they also observed some concerning behavior when David threw a tantrum in the car after his grandparents refused to buy him something on a whim. He rocked the car back and forth in frustration but calmed down as soon as they got home. This incident made his grandmother realize that David was struggling with emotional issues. Determined to help David, his grandparents began taking him to various doctors and clinics. His grandmother wanted him to stay longer so they could address his problems, but Susan was reluctant to let him stay for too long. Eventually, she bought a ticket and insisted that David return home. When he did, he surprised his mother and sister with his good behavior, and even brought Jennifer a small gift. At this point, Susan had been considering buying a car for Jennifer to make her commute to work easier, but Susan realized she didn't have enough money. Jennifer was unhappy about this and insisted she needed a car for convenience. Her mother asked her to be patient. A month later, Susan was shocked to receive a bill for the children's phone services that totaled $1,500. She found out that Jennifer had been spending all her free time talking to Paul, while David was frequently online, which led to high charges. Susan explained to her children that this was unacceptable and urged them to reduce their phone usage. Shortly after, Susan received a notification that Jennifer had spent an additional $200 on phone calls. Furious and already facing financial difficulties, Susan confronted Jennifer, who claimed that her paycheck had been delayed and that she intended to cover the costs herself. At that point, Susan decided to contact the restaurant where Jennifer worked to inquire about the delay in her daughter's pay. For the past month and a half, Jennifer had not shown up for work, so there was no paycheck for her. This shocked Susan, who realized that Jennifer had been dishonest. Instead of working, she had been spending time with her boyfriend. The next day, Susan at work, leaving David home alone, wandering around the courtyard of the house without clothes, which scared the neighbors. At that moment, Susan understood that she had lost control over her children and felt powerless to change things. To support the family, she had to work all the time. By the end of September, the situation had worsened. Jennifer decided to take advantage of her mother's constant work schedule. She started inviting Paul and Marilee over to the guest room, where her father used to live, spending time with them while Susan was away. When Susan was home, They acted like good guests, but as soon as she left, they behaved rudely. David was aware of everything but kept it a secret from Susan, supporting his sister and her friends. Eventually, they all grew tired of their parents' restrictions on their lives. This frustration led to a dangerous plan to kill Jennifer's mothers and Marilee's mothers, as well as Paul's parents. The trio became involved in various criminal ideas, including poisoning Susan with crushed prescription pills or arranging for her to be electrocuted in the bath. They also considered using a baseball bat, knives to cause serious injury. Paul even thought about shooting his father and stepmother, while Marilee planned to stab her mother while she slept. In the final phase of their plan, the teenagers intended to steal Susan's car, take their parents' money, and escape to Canada. On September 22, 2008, 14-year-old Marilee White had been missing for several days and had not answered her phone. Concerned, her mother reported her daughter as missing. Marilee's friends were also unable to contact her. Marilee's mother took action by distributing flyers with Marilee's photo and contacting the police. Fortunately, a patrol found Marilee wandering aimlessly on the outskirts of town and brought her home. During this time, Marilee revealed that Paul, a friend, had abandoned her. The police persuaded her not to run away again, and it appeared that she had calmed down. However, on the morning of September 23, 2008, Marilee's mother woke up feeling a strange presence. When she opened her eyes, she saw Marilee standing over her bed with a large kitchen knife. Instead of attacking, she reacted defensively as Marilee demanded the car keys to drive to the Bailey family's house. Marilee planned to gather others and escape to Canada. Although she reluctantly gave her the keys, she prevented Marilee from leaving. As soon as Marilee stepped outside, she called the police. Authorities intercepted Marilee and took her to a juvenile detention center. There, Marilee told her cellmate about a plan to kill their parents, but nobody took her seriously. At this time, Paul Henson waited for his father and stepmother to leave their trailer in the morning to go shopping. He broke into his father's room and took his .22 caliber handgun. He intended to shoot them when they returned, but they unexpectedly stopped at a movie theater and then went to visit friends, which delayed him return. Frustrated by the wait, Paul decided to leave and went back to Susan's house. That evening, Marilee was released from custody, and at the same time, Paul's parents reported him missing. The next day, September 24, David took a large knife with him to school. When the school administration learned about it, they issued a written warning to his mother. Susan put the warning on the refrigerator, but was too busy to address it right away. The following day, a police officer approached her to inform her about the search for Paul Henson, suggesting he might be at their house. Although she couldn't find him there, she noticed clear signs that he had been visiting frequently. The detective asked for permission to enter the house and talk to Jennifer, and she agreed. From the beginning, Jennifer seemed nervous. The detective knew about the teenager's deceptive plan and decided to ask Jennifer where Paul was. She said she hadn't seen her boyfriend since Saturday. The detective then requested to speak with her alone, but her mother, Susan, refused. Suspecting that Paul might be hiding in the house, the detective asked to search the premises, but Susan denied the request, stating that a warrant was needed. As a result, the detective left without any new information. The search for Paul continued, and another police officer arrived at the Bailey home. This time, Susan was informed that there were reports suggesting Paul might have a missing .22 caliber pistol from his father's trailer. Worried about safety, she reluctantly allowed the search, although she was not happy about it. During the search, they found several suspicious items, including a large butcher knife, hidden under a couch cushion in the living room. Since the knife did not belong to the Baileys, Susan accused Jennifer of planning to run away with Paul again. Jennifer explained that her friend might have accidentally left his knife at her house during his last visit, but this explanation did not convince Susan. Without waiting for the police to leave, Susan started arguing with her daughter again. Susan threatened to send her to live with her father or grandparents. During a search of Jennifer's room, they found evidence that she was packing her belongings. They also discovered several knives, which raised suspicions. However, since they couldn't find Paul's gun, the police left the house. Later, the mother found a box of ammunition hidden in one of the suitcases and became worried. She called the police again, requesting a more thorough search of her home. When they returned, the police took the ammunition but still did not find a gun. Instead, they found even more knives scattered around the house. In the trash, they found an empty bottle of antidepressants that belonged to Marilee. The Bailey family did not use such medications, but the police were unaware of this girl at the time and overlooked these concerning signs. Paul's father arrived at the house anxious about his son. He packed up Paul's belongings and left with everyone else. The following day, Susan struggled to find a way to resolve issues with her children, but nothing seemed to work. On September 25, she went to her regular job, followed by her second job, finally finishing around midnight. Throughout the day, Susan tried to contact her children, but both ignored her calls and messages. When she got home, she immediately sensed that something was off. The lights were off. Inside, she discovered the usual chaos left by her children. As she moved upstairs in the darkness, the house felt eerily quiet. As Susan climbed the stairs, someone suddenly grabbed her by the neck and covered her mouth with a cloth that had a chemical smell. Just then, Jennifer, Paul, and David stepped out of the shadows. They quickly slit Susan's throat and began stabbing her repeatedly with knives until she lay motionless on the floor within minutes. However, this horrific act was only part of their sinister plan. On September 26, Susan's mother received multiple calls from worried colleagues about Susan, as she had not shown up for her shifts that morning, a surprising behavior for someone who was known to be a workaholic. Susan's mother made several attempts to contact Susan, but was unsuccessful. Eventually, she reached out to the police department in Roanoke, Texas, asking them to check on the Bailey family's home. Over the next 2 days, patrol officers visited the house multiple times, but found no evidence that anyone was there. The lights were off, no cars were in the driveway, and all the doors and windows were closed. There were no signs of distress. It appeared as if the family had gone on vacation. Despite this, Susan's mother was deeply concerned that something might have gone wrong and urged the police to continue investigating. At 3:30 a.m. on September 28, 2008, a police officer in South Dakota spotted a suspicious vehicle parked near a closed gas station. He stopped to observe and noticed a teenager got out without turning on the headlights, did something briefly, then returned to the vehicle, and they all drove away. The officer decided to follow them. He saw that the car had Texas license plates, indicating they had traveled a long distance. However, it was unusual for teenagers to be out so late alone, making the situation seem very odd. The police officer pulled over the car and noticed a teenager driving. In the passenger seat was another minor, a girl, and in the back seat was a younger boy with a large dog. The car was stopped, and they were asked for identification, but none of them had any. The driver was 16-year-old Paul Henson. When the police officer checked his information, he discovered that Paul had been reported as a runaway and was also a suspect in a firearms case. The car belonged to Susan Bailey. Backup was requested, and they searched the stolen vehicle, but no gun was found. Jennifer's statements were inconsistent from the beginning. She appeared frightened and exhausted. Meanwhile, Texas police were alerted that the missing persons had been located. When Texas detectives heard this, they realized that Susan would never have allowed her children to travel that far without her. They suspected that something had happened to her and decided it was time to thoroughly investigate the Bailey home. especially after numerous requests from Susan's parents and colleagues. Upon entering the house, the detectives were immediately hit by a strong smell of decomposition. On the first floor, they found only a plate of pudding that had fallen on the floor. Forensic analysis later revealed that the pudding was laced with drugs. On the second floor, at the top of the stairs, they discovered Susan lying face down, blood everywhere. She had suffered 26 stab wounds and had been brutally beaten with a blunt object. The bathtub was filled with water, and an electric cord with exposed wires was hanging from the curtain plugged in. It appeared that someone had meticulously planned multiple methods to murder her. The smell of decomposition mixed with the smell of toiletries. A receipt found in the house confirmed that 13-year-old David had purchased these cleaning supplies at a local Walmart at the indicated time. In Jennifer's room, investigators found a diary in which she detailed plans for committing murder and starting a new life with Paul in Canada. They also uncovered additional evidence, including freshly cut hair belonging to Paul, clothing stained with Susan's blood, and DNA traces from Jennifer and David. It was clear that the teenagers had not effectively cleaned up the murder scene. The three suspects were detained in Texas, while a dog associated with them was taken to a shelter. The juvenile offenders quickly began to speak. Paul Henson accused David of the murder, claiming they all fled their town to protect the boy from the authorities. When detectives questioned David, he admitted to killing his mother and laughed. The detectives were taken aback. They did not expect such a response from a 13-year-old. Jennifer placed all the blame on Paul, insisting that she and her brother had done nothing wrong. The only person who avoided severe punishment was Marilee White, who was not in the car and had no evidence linking her to Susan's murder. However, she remained under police scrutiny for a long time and was questioned multiple times. Eventually, Marilee confirmed her friend's boyfriend's claims that they had planned to kill their families. She shared many details about their relationships. According to Marilee, Paul, Jennifer, and she had become very close. Paul enjoyed being intimate with both girls simultaneously, arguing that since he was dating Jennifer and had a separate relationship with Marilee, it wasn't cheating. The group engaged in occult practices, including cutting themselves and drinking each other's blood. Jennifer's plan was to kill all their parents, escape to Canada, and start their own commune. Because of her cooperation with the police, no charges were filed against Marilee. She was compelled to testify at the trial against the other conspirators. Based on her testimony, the prosecution believed that Jennifer ambushed her mother in a hallway on the second floor and attacked her with a bat, while Paul Henson came from behind and cut her throat. David also took part in the crime and inflicted superficial stab wounds on her body. Jennifer and Paul, despite being minors, were tried as adults for murder and each received a 60-year prison sentence. They will be eligible for parole starting in 2038. David was also tried as an adult for his involvement in the crime and was convicted of complicity, receiving a 26-year sentence. He will be eligible for release in 2034 when he turns 40. Following these events, Marilee White moved to a different state with her mother and changed her name. Her photo is kept confidential to protect her safety, as she was a young witness. Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case. The case of Mary Catherine Edwards. Before the advent of modern DNA research techniques, building a criminal database was challenging, making the investigation and tracing of crimes less effective. However, recent technological advances have led to the development of sophisticated tools that can help identify criminals who have been on the run for years. Now, no one can evade justice. On January 14, 1995, the Edwards family had a planned gathering. Saturday dinners together were a cherished tradition for the parents and their two daughters. So, when one of the twin sisters, Mary, was missing, it raised immediate concerns. Mary Catherine, 31, did not attend the dinner and did not answer calls from her family members, who were trying to reach her from the restaurant. Frustrated, they decided to go to Mary's home in Beaumont, Texas, where she was living at the time. When Mary's mother arrived at the house, she became worried upon finding the door unlocked. Inside, they heard running water but received no response to their calls. The bathroom was flooded, and Mary was discovered unresponsive in distressing conditions. Her sister Allison immediately called the police to report that she had found Mary's lifeless body. The sisters were twins, raised in Texas, and were the only children in the Edwards family. The loss of one was a devastating shock. They had always been inseparable, kind-hearted, and dedicated to helping others, especially children. After graduating high school, both sisters pursued careers as teachers and worked at the same school. They were so similar that students and faculty often confused them. At the time of her death, Mary was 31 years old and thriving in her career. Known for her bright personality, her murder sparked widespread outrage and anger. Mary was cherished by her students, many of whom felt a close bond with her. Hundreds of children, relatives, and friends attended her funeral, with many students mourning the loss of a woman who had been a vital source of support in their challenging lives. Some were in tears upon hearing the news of her passing. Parents urged detectives to take action against the criminal responsible for the brutal death of Mary. The community was horrified by the circumstances surrounding her death. Mary was found handcuffed in the bathroom, indicating that she had been abused. The bathtub was filled with blood, showing that she had fought back against her attacker, as evidenced by defensive wounds on her hands and body. Traces of the assault suggested that it occurred in her bedroom, where evidence was found on the bedding. Investigators suspected that Mary might have known her attacker, as there were no signs of forced entry into her home. The townspeople, who knew Mary well, cooperated with detectives, eager to identify the person responsible for such a horrific crime. Given the brutality and circumstances, detectives focused their investigation on her close acquaintances, believing there could be a personal motive. It was initially thought that Mary might have drowned, but an autopsy revealed that her lungs did not contain enough water, suggesting that water only entered her lungs after she had died. The true cause of death was asphyxiation, as indicated by distinct marks on her neck, and injuries suggesting she had been tightly restrained with great force until she could no longer resist. Forensic experts meticulously reconstructed the crime scene by examining the victim's house, starting with the bathroom and then moving to the bedroom. They collected a significant amount of evidence. The most alarming item found was the Smith & Wesson handcuffs that the victim had been restrained with, which resembled those used by police. This discovery left law enforcement officials confused, raising suspicions about whether someone connected to the police or a security worker might have had a personal relationship with the victim. The emotional impact of the case was deeply felt by everyone involved. In the weeks following the crime, detectives attempted to trace the serial number of the handcuffs, but their efforts were unsuccessful. By this time, the primary suspect had shifted to David Perry, the ex-boyfriend of Mary. Even though Mary was attractive and sociable, she maintained a small circle of close friends and had a few ex-lovers. She dedicated most of her time to her work and her students, leaving little room for a personal life. It was discovered that David Perry was the only person who might have had keys to her house. This raised concerns that he could have been stalking her and visiting her home out of jealousy or revenge. David agreed to cooperate with the police and provide everything needed for the examination. While waiting for the results, detectives interviewed mutual acquaintances of the couple, and everyone described David as a completely harmless person, showing no signs of aggression. He had no prior criminal record, history of violent or abuse offenses. Additionally, David Perry presented solid evidence of his alibi. He was not even in town on the night of the murder, as confirmed by multiple witnesses. David fully cooperated with the investigation, voluntarily provided DNA samples, and did not exhibit any characteristics of a criminal. Forensic analysis confirmed that the DNA did not match, leading to his removal from the list of suspects. Unfortunately, that was where the investigation stalled. Others in the victim's close circle also did not fit the criminal profile and had solid alibis. Although investigators had a lot of materials for analysis, the forensic technology at the time was insufficient to make further progress. The unsuccessful search continued for years. The situation changed significantly 23 years later, in 2018, with the introduction of a DNA analysis method that utilized genealogy. This method allowed investigators to find potential matches by examining relatives of the suspected. Law enforcement turned to the GEDmatch program, which collects DNA from Americans who voluntarily submit their samples, creating a large database. This database was instrumental in solving long-standing unsolved cases. When Detective Brandon Bess was advised to revisit the old cases, he immediately recalled the unsolved murder of Mary Edwards, which had troubled him for years. In April 2020, DNA samples from the scene related to Mary were sent to a lab at Othram for analysis. Here, many matches were found with the relatives of the killer. This marked the beginning of building a family tree related to the suspect. The number of names that needed analysis was overwhelming, totaling several thousand individuals. At this point, the detective's wife, who had a keen interest in genealogy, decided to assist with the investigation. She dedicated her free time to carefully examining matches from this extensive list. This task required precision, as each name needed to be evaluated accurately to ensure their efforts were worthwhile. Additionally, the investigators reviewed the diaries of Mary. It was believed that the victim may have had an obsessive admirer who harmed her out of unrequited love. Despite a thorough examination of the diary entries following the crime, no significant leads were uncovered. They then chose to cross-reference the names mentioned in the diaries with those in the genealogical records. During this process, the surname Lapointe began to come to light. The first identified relative of the murderer was Shara Lapointe. When contacted, Shara revealed that she is a well-known expert in genealogy and genetics. With decades of experience in her field, Shara had previously worked on challenging cases. Notably, she successfully identified one of the women buried along a state highway in the infamous Texas Fields of Death. Now, she was eager to apply her expertise to help solve other crimes, including the mystery surrounding Mary Edwards' death. She was prepared to assist with the investigation, even though it meant examining her own family members, which could lead to unsettling discoveries. As she began her analysis, she felt a sense of dread while checking the backgrounds of her own siblings, aware that the results might have serious implications. She needed to review about 7,500 names. Each individual on this list was examined slowly, requiring her to gather and process information about them and their relatives before either adding them to the family tree or discarding them. This process took several hours for each person. Over 3 months, detectives and Shara Lapointe devoted all their free time to searching for the criminal. Eventually, they found a promising lead, a couple living in Beaumont who matched the profile of the murderer's family. They have 2 sons who attended Forest Park High School, the same school Mary attended as a child. This led to 2 main suspects, Michael Foreman and Clayton Foreman. Michael did not match the age profile for the time of the crime. After checking, he was found to have no criminal record or history of aggressive behavior, so he was quickly ruled out as a suspect. Clayton's situation was different. He had known Mary Edwards from high school and was closer in age to her. Furthermore, he had a criminal record for abuse, making him a strong suspect. In 1981, a 19-year-old girl reported to the police that Clayton Foreman had tied her hands and abused her. The details of that crime were strikingly similar to the incident involving Mary that occurred nearly 15 years later, with the key difference being that the first victim survived. She had also attended Forest Park High School, while Clayton was a manager at that time. The incident was effectively concealed, leading to Clayton receiving a suspended sentence and a fine. At that time, there were no police databases containing DNA samples, and he was not required to provide any. This lack of evidence is why Clayton was not identified during the investigation into the death of Diana Coe, his girlfriend of 3 years, with whom he had been planning to marry. Although Diana described him as a nice guy, it seems she did not truly know him. Less than 3 months before their wedding, she discovered the details of his abuse charge, the suspended sentence, and the fine, prompting her to want to end their engagement. However, Clayton, a manipulative liar, convinced her that it was all a misunderstanding. He avoided discussing the issue but created a believable narrative. Diana, eager to believe him, prioritized her relationship over her safety, which turned out to be a mistake. They went ahead with the marriage despite warnings from her family. When Diana and Clayton were married for just over 11 years, Diana claimed that Clayton frequently lied about his significant financial issues. She also observed that he had an unusual obsession with police handcuffs and law enforcement tools, even hanging a pair of handcuffs from the rearview mirror of his car. By the time Mary was killed, Diana had already divorced Clayton. She recalled calling him in tears to share the news, but she was taken aback by his indifferent response. He continued the conversation as if nothing had happened and then hung up. It became evident that he was likely not overly concerned about the situation. He was probably connected to the events that had transpired. The suspect was now 60 years old and no longer lived in Beaumont. He had been located in a small town called Reynoldsburg, Ohio, which had a population of a few thousand. At that time, Clayton was working as a driver. Investigators were able to find his address and all necessary information. Now they needed to collect his DNA for analysis. They set up surveillance on the suspect's house. A local police officer even took his trash, which was sent to a forensic lab. DNA from Clayton was discovered on a beer bottle found in the garbage. The match was nearly 100%. A significant finding indicated that the investigation was nearly complete after all these years. The next step was to confront the suspect. The detectives in charge of the case traveled to Ohio and devised a plan to lure Clayton into a trap. Since he was a driver, they decided to approach him about a fictitious lost item that a client was supposedly searching for. On April 29, 2021, Clayton was summoned to the police precinct under the pretense of discussing a lost wallet. He agreed to come in voluntarily. For the first time in 26 years since a brutal murder, the suspected perpetrator was in the interrogation room. The detectives informed him about the murder of Mary Edwards. This news shocked him, but Clayton attempted to maintain his composure and initially denied knowing her. The detectives then showed him a wedding photo of his first wife, which included Mary and her twin sister as bridesmaids. This reminded him that Mary had indeed attended his wedding, as his wife had invited her. From the beginning, Clayton became visibly nervous as the detectives bombarded him with questions, revealing inconsistencies in his story. The detectives focused on his vulnerabilities, hoping to obtain a confession. Clayton insisted that he was unaware of Mary's death and claimed he had never been to her house. However, these statements were quickly refuted by his ex-wife. Despite the evidence, Clayton continued to deny any connection to Mary, which seemed to be a defensive reaction. He also denied having had intimate relations with her, but this was proven false when DNA samples matching his were found on her body. The realization that his DNA was discovered on her underwear and body left him bewildered. When he was arrested for the murder of Mary Edwards, he insisted on having a lawyer and stopped cooperating with the investigators. In a symbolic gesture of victory in this long-standing case, Clayton Foreman was handcuffed with the same type of cuffs that had been found on Mary. On March 12, 2024, over 29 years after the murder of Mary, Beaumont prosecutor Patrick Knauth and colleagues Mike Laird, Sonny Eckhart are ready to go to trial. The absence of a lawyer limited his options. Weak attempts to invoke the statute of limitations were unsuccessful. Clayton Foreman remained obstinately silent, neither confessing to the murder nor defending himself in court. For everyone involved in the investigation, emotions ran high. Shara LaPointe worried that the Clayton's family would resent her for participating in Clayton's arrest. Nevertheless, she received support, with others expressing concern for her safety leading up to the court hearings. Shara felt it was her duty to uncover the truth behind the cold-blooded murder, regardless of the personal costs. One of the key witnesses for the prosecution was the twin sister of Mary, Allison, who emotionally recounted how Clayton took away the person she loved most. Even after many years, she still bore a striking resemblance to her sister. During the trial, the prosecution brought in experts in genealogy and genetics, along with forensic laboratory specialists, to explain advanced DNA analysis techniques to the jurors. It was crucial to demonstrate that relative matching methods were reliable. The prosecution also focused on women who had been impacted by Clayton's actions. One of his former colleagues testified, sharing her observations of Clayton's unusual interest in police items at work. As his subordinate who handled documents, she often opened his desk drawer and found a pair of handcuffs. Although she found this odd, she didn't feel comfortable asking him about it, thinking it was just one of his quirks. The defendant's last wife shared how she discovered many dress-revealingly photos of underage girls. When she confronted Clayton about them, he responded calmly, saying he needed them to fantasize about taking away their innocence. He then laughed, dismissing it as a failed joke. Despite these disturbing revelations, Clayton continued to evade justice. One of his victims, Diana Coe, also attended the trial. She believed in his guilt and testified for the prosecution. It was during this time that she learned about another victim and realized the full extent of her ex-husband's cruelty. However, she pointed out that during their 11 years of marriage, he did not display such behaviors during their intimate moments and never crossed reasonable boundaries in their relationship. The first victim of Clayton's assault provided a detailed testimony about her experience. At the time, she was 19 years old and just months away from his wedding to Diana. One night, while driving home along a dirt road, her car got stuck. Suddenly, a civilian car pulled up, and a man claiming to be a police officer got out to offer her help. Feeling helpless, she accepted his assistance. However, as she stepped out of her car, he attacked her, tied her hands behind her back, and threatened her with a knife, saying he would slit her throat if she resisted. Clayton abused her. Surprisingly, afterward, he became more gentle, even driving her home. During the ride, he asked her not to cry, tried to comfort her, and expressed remorse for what had happened, claiming he didn't want to hurt her. This sudden shift in his demeanor was unsettling, especially considering the violent behavior he had just exhibited. At that time, she reported the incident to the police, but she was fearful. In court, she mentioned that she had forgiven her attacker and harbored no resentment towards him. She did not wish to harm Clayton. She believed he truly regretted his actions and would not reoffend. This perspective contributed to the light punishment he received. Now the first victim feels guilty, thinking that if Clayton had been imprisoned, it might have prevented the murder of Mary. Additionally, another victim testified against the defendant in court. Previously, she had been too afraid to contact law enforcement. This woman was also a friend of Diana, with whom she had stayed in touch during school. According to her testimony, Clayton attacked her one evening in 2006 while she was living alone in her apartment. Their past friendship allowed her to communicate with him, and he initially appeared to be an ordinary guy until his darker side emerged. One evening, Clayton visited her apartment and revealed that he was struggling financially and having marital issues. He was convincing, expressing a need for someone to understand and listen to him without judgment. Feeling sympathetic, she let him in. However, once she turned her back, he attacked her, held a gun to her head, threatened her, and assaulted her. He also used handcuffs during the attack. After it was over, Clayton surprisingly softened, apologized, and asked her not to report the incident to the police. She was scared, so she did not file charges against him. Following that night, Clayton did not reach out to her at all. It's important to note that his assaults were strikingly similar to a situation that could have occurred with Mary Edwards. Unlike previous victims, however, Mary fought back against his attack. The prosecution's witnesses testified for 7 days, while the defense presented no evidence. The defense attorney claimed that although Clayton might be an abuser, there was no proof that he was also a murderer. The defense suggested that Clayton's limited options might have influenced the situation. They acknowledged incidents involving other women, stating that Clayton typically did not act aggressively towards his wives, except for his fetish involving handcuffs. After hearing the prosecution's arguments, the jurors went to deliberate. They found Clayton Foreman guilty of murdering Mary Catherine Edwards. He received a life sentence. Clayton is eligible for parole in 2061. By then, he will be 101 years old. The jurors stated that it was not merely the testimonies from the traumatized women that led to their decision. Rather, it was the forensic experts' analysis of DNA evidence showing a nearly 100% match with Clayton Foreman's DNA that confirmed their conviction. The experts provided such a thorough explanation of the principles of modern forensic methodologies that it was difficult to find more convincing words. The convict also refused to admit his guilt until the end, even in the face of evidence regarding the abuse. Naturally, against this background, he never revealed the details of his heinous crime. Nevertheless, there remained even more horrifying questions. For many years, Clayton managed to skillfully hide his malicious nature from everyone around him, even from the women he lived closely with. Most people around him had no idea that he was capable of murder. Authorities suspected that he might have been involved in a significantly larger number of bloody crimes that remained unsolved. Clayton Foreman is in state prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2061, of course, if he lives that long. He continues to keep silent, while authorities do not lose hope that he will eventually reveal his secrets.